Chapter 1489. Jian Chen spat out a mouthful of blood as his body constantly trembled. The flesh on his chest rapidly melted away at a visible rate, turning into puddles of blood. This was the sliver of power of laws that the tower had left behind when it pierced through his body. The power was filled with destruction, constantly destroying Jian Chen's body. If it were not for the fact that Jian Chen's chaotic body was abnormally tough, preventing the power of laws from destroying him, his entire upper body probably would have melted away already. After piercing through Jian Chen's body, the tiny tower dispersed after exhausting its last bit of energy. With the disappearance of the tower, the passageway to the fourth floor immediately appeared. However, Jian Chen was currently in excruciating pain. The sliver of power of laws that the tower had left behind in his body constantly shone brightly, causing the wound on Jian Chen's chest to slowly melt away as if thousands of ants were gnawing at it. Even though his chaotic force was extraordinary, it was unable to stop the power of laws from spreading. After all, his chaotic force was not true chaotic force. Just the chaotic force of the fifth floor was not enough to fend off the sliver of power of laws. Suddenly, Jian Chen bellowed out while enduring the pain. The bellow shook the sky, and immediately, endless white light condensed from the surroundings. He gathered sword qi in his chest, using the power of the way of the sword to fend off the power of laws in his wound. With the addition of the power of the way of the sword, the power of laws in Jian Chen's wound was immediately suppressed. The two different powers of laws immediately began an intense battle. In the end, the power of laws that belonged to the artifact spirit of the Nita Tower did not last long enough, so it was dispersed by Jian Chen's power of the way of the sword. After purging the power of laws in his body, Jian Chen finally let out a sigh of relief. In just a short while, the bowl-sized wound on his chest had doubled in size, taking up most of his chest. His organs and flesh had all vanished. Even though he was heavily injured, Jian Chen still stood there like a mountain. The toughness of the chaotic body allowed him to remain brimming with vitality despite being heavily injured. However, his face was pale. It's been a very long time since I've been so heavily injured. The power of laws really is terrifying. I need to be careful when I fight the tower spirit in the future, Jian Chen murmured to himself. He immediately sat down and used the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force to heal. Around half a minute later, Jian Chen's wounds had completely healed. The missing piece of flesh on his chest had regrown. He had recovered to his peak condition once again. After changing into a set of clean clothes, Jian Chen set foot on the fourth floor with the twin swords on his back. The fourth floor was a vast expanse of mountains and rivers. Jian Chen discovered many withered heavenly resources, as well as the remains of many precious medicines. They basically covered the entire place. It was basically a garden of medicines. However, to his great disappointment, even though this was a vast garden of medicines that had once been filled with priceless medicines, all of them had been destroyed. Not a single one of them remained intact. Jian Chen also engaged in an intense battle against the tower spirit on the fourth floor. The artifact spirit on this floor was slightly more powerful. Although Jian Chen emerged victorious in the end, he was heavily injured at the same time. Before long, Jian Chen healed up and entered the fifth floor. This floor was clearly where the Anita Grand Prime reared rare beasts. Huge skeletons could be seen everywhere, and many of them were tens of thousands of meters long. Even though they had died many years ago, Jian Chen could still sense a tremendous pressure from the skeletons, almost suffocating him. It was very difficult to imagine just how powerful the skeletons were when they were alive. Moreover, the skeletons had not eroded away. They were still as tough as rocks, but they were all destroyed soon after the battle between Jian Chen and the tower spirit. This time, Jian Chen had lost an arm after killing the tower spirit. A small portion of his body had been destroyed as well. He had only won after paying a heavy price. The tower spirit on the fifth floor possessed strength no weaker than late returnance experts. Coupled with the sliver of power that he controlled from the laws of destruction, his battle prowess was close to reciprocity. Afterwards, Jianchen advanced courageously, passing through the 6th and 7th floors. The tower spirit on these 2 floors possessed the strength of reciprocity. If it were not for the suppression of the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt's 4 swords, he probably would have been able to erupt with the strength of godhood even if he had been split into 9 pieces, unable to recover even after countless years. After passing through the 6th floor, Jianchen was basically half dead. He was extremely heavily injured, and he only managed to slay the artifact spirit after several hours of intense battle. Jianchen had used everything he had to pass through the 7th floor. Not only did he use the primordial god silk, but he also used a strand of sword chi from the Sword of Mortality in his arm to slay the artifact spirit in the end. Otherwise, he would have probably died. However, to Jianchen's relief, the 4 strands of sword chi were not limited to a single attack. According to his estimations, each strand of sword chi could unleash the might of reciprocity 3 times. After that, their power would weaken drastically, and they would only be able to erupt with the strength of returnance experts. The further they went, the weaker they would become until the sword chi dispersed in the end. Although the primordial god silk could not block the attacks of origin realm experts for Jianchen, it was still tough. With the protection of the primordial god silk, Jianchen could avoid being pierced through, but his body would have to endure an even more violent impact. Even with the 5th layer of Jianchen's chaotic body, he found it rather difficult to endure. When Jianchen reached the 8th floor, he decisively removed the primordial god silk. Although the primordial god silk could prevent him from being pierced through, the strength of the artifact spirit on the 8th floor was probably enough to shatter his body to pieces through the primordial god silk. The artifact spirit on the 8th floor became even more vicious and crazy. Hidden within was a fear for Jianchen. The fear was so great that it had reached the depths of its soul. This was already the 8th floor. Jianchen had slain 7 other bodies along the way. If this body was slain as well, only the body on the 9th floor would remain. Once the body on the 9th floor was slain by Jianchen as well, it would truly vanish. Even though the body on the 9th floor was stronger, it was unwilling to take the risk. At that moment, the artifact spirit felt an unprecedented sense of danger. The sense of danger was countless times greater than when it faced the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt in the past. Even though he was not the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt's opponent back then, he was still in peak condition. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was undying. Coupled with the fact that the Anita Grand Prime was present, the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt was unable to kill him. He could only seal and suppress him. However, not only did he fail to recover from his wounds after so many years, but he had also become weaker and weaker under the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt suppression and seals. He was basically on the verge of death now. If he was killed in his current condition, he would definitely die. If it died in such a state, then it would truly be destroyed. After all, it was still unable to become truly indestructible like the sword spirits. Being able to reach the 8th floor is already a great honor for you. Today you will be buried here. You will never have the chance to reach the 9th floor. This will be the place where you die. I will kill you. The red-robed boy yelled at Jianchen as he hovered several hundred meters away from Jianchen on the 8th floor. Artifact spirit, are you still so stubborn? If you don't yield, all you can do is disperse. Xing's figure appeared and said to the red-robed boy. She wanted to persuade him one last time. However, what answered her was the red-robed boy's surging killing intent and an attack condensed from the laws of destruction toward Jianchen. Afterwards, the red-robed boy waved his hands, controlling the power of the world within the artifact spirit tower with great difficulty. He was prepared to use a secret technique. This time, the red-robed boy used his full strength right from the start. He did not hold back at all. He wanted to cut down Jianchen as quickly and cleanly as possible. Jianqin was stern. The red-robed boy on the 8th floor was equivalent to mid-reciprocity, or even late reciprocity. Coupled with the sliver of power he had grasped over laws, there were basically no experts at the same level who were his opponent. If Jianqin faced him by himself, he would not have any chance of victory, even with the azulate swords. He would not even be able to fight back. Jianqin waved his right hand, and immediately a streak of light flickered. One of the 4 strands of sword qi hidden in his arm, the sword of reincarnation, suddenly flew out. It turned into a white streak of light and shot toward the red-robed boy with lightning speed. Afterwards, Jianqin waved his right hand a second time and a third time, shooting out the sword qi from the immortal slaughtering sword and the immortal slaughtering sword. He used 3 strands of sword qi to deal with the red-robed boy. Every single strand of sword qi moved with indescribable speed. They seemed to be able to pierce through space and break through the limits of distance, approaching the red-robed boy in a single instance. The red-robed boy's face changed drastically. He had experienced sword qi like this on the 7th floor before. Although the power of the sword qi was nowhere close to what the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt had used in the past, the sword qi was enough to threaten his life now. However, the sword qi just happened to move with indescribable speed. The red-robed boy was unable to dodge at all. He could only watch as the sword qi approached him. The first strand of sword qi dispersed the laws of destruction. It passed through the red-robed boy with only a third of its power remaining, causing him to shriek out in agony. He was in extreme pain. Afterwards, the second strand of sword qi pierced the red-robed boy's body, causing him to become semi-transparent. The secret technique he was about to use was forced to stop as well. Chapter 1490. Although the 3 strands of sword qi were only equivalent to reciprocity, there was still a sliver of the power of the way of the sword left behind by the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. Although the power of the way of the sword had fallen from Sword God due to the passage of time and was nowhere near as powerful as when it was at its peak, it was still greater than sword origin. So each strand of sword qi possessed the power to kill regular reciprocity experts. Even the artifact spirit on the 8th floor was unable to withstand the combined attack of the 3 strands of sword qi. It directly collapsed. However, the red-robed boy did not die. The thin mist that remained in the air began to surge, condensing back into the red-robed boy's figure a while later. The figure was so faint that it was almost impossible to see. Even burning away his spirit was not enough to achieve this. I never thought that you would have 4 strands of that bastard Nirvanix sword qi on you, and not just one. However, for strands of sword qi just happens to correspond to his 4 swords. Now that you've used up all your sword qi, I'd like to see how you deal with my clone on the 9th floor. The 9th floor will be where you truly die. I'll be waiting for you there, the red-robed boy sneered coldly. Jianqin said nothing. With a swing of the Ziying sword, a strand of sword qi immediately shot out, dispersing the red-robed boy's figure. Afterwards, Jianqin was in no hurry to go to the 9th floor. Instead, he sat down on the 8th floor and allowed himself to recover to his peak condition. After all, the clone on the 9th floor was the strongest clone of the artifact spirit. It was extremely likely that he had reached godhood. Even if he could still use 2 of his 4 strands of sword qi, Jianqin was not completely confident that he could kill the artifact spirit. It was extremely likely that a vicious battle would occur. If the artifact spirit on the 9th floor really does possess the strength of godhood, I'll probably be slain in a single clash even with the azulate swords. With my current strength, I can't put up any resistance at all before godhood experts. However, it's not like the artifact spirit doesn't have any weaknesses. His greatest weakness is that once he runs out of energy, he can't replenish it. His energy will decrease with every use, and every time he's injured, his strength will decrease. As a result, once I enter the 9th floor, I only need to use the 4 strands of sword qi from from the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt to heavily injure him as soon as possible, and his strength will drop. Once he's injured to a certain extent, he'll fall below godhood. Jianqin sat there in thought with his eyes closed. He replayed his battle against the artifact spirit on the 9th floor over and over again in his head. Jianqin had analyzed and imagined the battle from various angles. He had even included all the techniques he knew about the artifact spirit. In the end, he arrived at the conclusion that he did not have no chance at victory against the artifact spirit on the 9th floor. It mainly depended on the performance of the 4 strands of sword chi from the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. It's a pity that I've already used all 4 strands of sword chi once. I only have the power for 2 reciprocity attacks left. If I had the power for 3 attacks, my chances of victory would be 80%, Jianqin sighed. He felt very helpless inside. The artifact spirit on the 8th floor was so powerful that he could not deal with it. If he did not use the sword chi from the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, he would not be able to make it to the 9th floor at all. He might even die on the 8th floor. However, I still have my greatest trump card. The only pity is that the price of using it is just too great. It's so great that I can't bear it. However, if I really do face life-threatening danger and fall into dire straits, I can only use this move. A gleam of light flashed through Jianqin's eyes. The fusion of the twin swords was his final trump card, and it was also the move he was unwilling to use the most. This time, Jianqin spent half a month meditating. Not only did he return to his peak condition, but he also thought of many ways to deal with the artifact spirit on the 9th floor. He made the most preparations possible. Half a month later, Jianqin stood up and finally set foot on the 9th floor. As soon as he set foot on the 9th floor, Jianqin disappeared with a flash before he could even see his surroundings. He left in a single instance to prevent the artifact spirit from ambushing him at the entrance. Everything was calm. The desolate world on the 9th floor was terrifyingly silent. There was no sign of life at all. Jianqin hovered in the air cautiously as he cautiously observed his surroundings. He was rather surprised. The artifact spirit had not been waiting at the entrance for him to launch a sneak attack like he had imagined. Does the tower spirit of the 9th floor have enough confidence in dealing with me, so it doesn't bother to launch a sneak attack? Jianqin thought to himself as his face immediately became stern. At this moment, a golden light suddenly appeared in the distant horizon. It illuminated a small portion of the sky, creating a wondrous sight in this desolate world. Jianqin stared at the golden light in the distance. After a moment of hesitation, he flew over. The Ziying sword and Qing Sua sword hovered above Jianqin's head as they flickered with azure and violet light. They were ready to launch a lightning strike at any time. When Jianqin arrived at the origin of the golden light, he discovered that it was actually a colossal palace. It shone with dazzling light as a terrifying pressure permeated the surroundings. The palace seemed rather illusionary, and he seemed to be able to see the scenery behind it. The palace was only a projection, not the actual thing. Jianqin stared at the majestic palace before him. Even though it was only a projection, it gave Jianqin a feeling like it stood above the world. It possessed a supreme presence, as if the laws of the world were beneath its feet. The heavenly palace of Bixing. Jianqin looked at the huge signboard above the entrance of the palace. There were 4 words on the signboard. They seemed to contain the changes of laws, containing the mysteries of the world within the words. He clearly did not recognize the words, but the moment he saw the signboard, he thought of the heavenly palace of Bixing for some reason. I'll let you die before Master Sky. You can die with no regrets, ha ha ha. Arrogant laughter rang out in Jianqin's ears. With that, the red-robed boy actually charged out of the palace, lunging at Jianqin as a blur. The pressure he gave off was so powerful that Jianqin felt like he was carrying a mountain on his back. His movements became rather sluggish, and the presence of death entered Jianqin's heart, shocking Jianqin. The current strength of the red-robed boy made Jianqin feel like he was facing the end of the world. Jianqin's eyes shone brightly. With a wave of his hand, he was about to use the 4 strands of sword qi from the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. But at that moment, he saw a vague, strange smile on the boy's face. Jianqin's eyes suddenly narrowed from the strange smile. At that critical moment, Jianqin seemed to sense something. His hand did not change, but it was not the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt's sword qi that he shot out. Instead, he shot out 4 small swords condensed from regular sword qi. They possessed a sliver of the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt's presence of the laws of the sword, so the 4 regular strands of sword qi seemed like the sword qi the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt had left behind in the past. Just as Jianqin sent out the 4 strands of sword qi, Jianqin waved his hand again, and another 4 strands of sword qi shot out with lightning-like speed. A total of 8 strands of sword qi with a sliver of the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt's presence shot towards the red-robed boy at the same time. However, this was not the end. After shooting out the 8 strands of sword qi, Jianqin used a sword skill as quickly as he could. The Ziying sword immediately turned into a 100-meter-long sword. With the appearance of the sword domain, the area the sword occupied turned into another domain, trapping the red-robed boy. The red-robed boy came to a halt. His posture froze as he was immobilized by the power of the sword domain. The 8 strands of sword qi with the presence of the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt shot over with unbelievable speed. They'd basically pierced the red-robed boy's body at the same time. Afterwards, the 100-meter-long Ziying sword swung towards the red-robed boy's head, cleaving his body in half. The red-robed boy rapidly dispersed in the air, but there was no pain or reluctance on his face. Instead, he smiled strangely. Jianqin stared at the rapidly dispersing boy in a daze. His face immediately became extremely ugly. He said with a sunken face, "That's a fake. That's not the real body." "Ha ha ha, that's right. That really wasn't my real body earlier. It was just a clone condensed by me. It's a pity that you realized it too late." As soon as Jianqin finished speaking, a familiar laugh rang out from nearby. Another red-robed boy suddenly appeared, walking out from the side of the heavenly palace of Bixing. He had been hiding there the entire time, using the might of the heavenly palace to conceal his presence so that he could fool the sword spirits. "Just as I expected, you actually still have that bastard sword qi. If it weren't for the fact that I was cautious and condensed a clone to probe you, I probably would have been heavily injured already. However, your sword qi has already been used up, so I'd like to see what else you can use to fight me. I only need a single move to kill you. So what if you become a taboo in the future? You'll still die to my hands in the end," the red-robed boy sneered. He suddenly pressed his right hand towards Jianqin, and with that, a tower immediately appeared above Jianqin's head. It was several dozen meters tall, exactly the same as the Inata Tower. It radiated with a presence that made even Jianqin shiver as it pressed down on Jianqin. Immediately, an extremely terrifying pressure appeared from the tower, immobilizing Jianqin's body. His feet sank into the ground under the tremendous pressure. All his bones cracked as if they were about to shatter from the pressure. Moreover, the ancient tower possessed the power of laws filled with destruction. The power of laws had already surpassed what Jianqin had seen on the lower floors. Chapter 1491. Boom! The Ziying sword collided with the tower, but it was unable to resist the tower's power. The powerful force caused the Ziying sword to fall to the ground, creating a huge crater. The Ziying sword sank deep into the ground. The tower did not slow down at all. It continued to press down on Jianqin with its destructive power of laws. Only when it came in contact with the spiral sword qi from the Qing Sa sword did the tower slow down slightly. The azure, spiral ripples gently wrapped around the tower, dispersing strands of the tower's power into the surroundings. The tower's power rapidly weakened within the spiral ripples. However, this only lasted for a few seconds. The tower passed through the spiral ripples and pressed down on the Qing Suo sword. The Qing Suo sword thundered and was struck deep into the ground like the Ziying sword. The spiral sword qi that could weaken the tower immediately collapsed. At this moment, the tower was only a few meters away from Jianqin's head. Jianqin seemed to have lost his mind. Without the twin swords, he could only rely on his own strength to stop the tower. He roared out furiously and protected himself with the light from the swords. He fused his chaotic force and the way of the sword into his fists as he threw them at the tower. Bang! With a heavy sound, Jianqin used all his strength to smash his fists against the tower. His body immediately trembled violently as blood spurted from his mouth. His arms that had struck the tower had become a bloody mess. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Jianqin's arms drooped powerlessly. The bones in his arms had been shattered, so they were no longer enough for him to raise them. The tower was only 3 inches away from his head. However, after being obstructed several times, the tower did not have much power left. At this crucial moment, Jianqin laid flat on the ground. He used his entire body to endure the final strike from the tower so that his head and soul would not be injured. Boom! The tower slammed into the ground viciously. The terrifying power caused the ground to shake violently, erupting with a heavy sound. Jianqin was reduced to a bloody mess. His entire body had changed shape. He lay on the ground powerlessly without moving at all. The power of the laws of destruction had invaded his body, constantly destroying it. Jianqin was heavily injured. All his bones had been destroyed, and not a single part of his body remained intact. He could not even stand up. Even with such heavy injuries, his presence of life was still very vigorous. Just when Jianqin wanted to condense the power of the way of the sword, when he sensed the power of laws wreaking havoc in his body, the 4 strands of sword qi that belonged to the nirvanic immortal exalt hidden in his arms actually released a weak strand of sword qi at that moment. The strand of sword qi was hidden in Jianqin's body, so it did not harm him at all. Instead, it entered his chest through his arm and spread through his entire body very quickly. Wherever the strand of sword qi passed by, the power of the laws of destruction in Jianqin's body would disperse. Very soon, the power of the laws of destruction in Jianqin's body was completely eliminated with the assistance of the 4 strands of sword qi. In the end, the strand of sword qi dispersed due to exhaustion. However, when the 4 strands of sword qi dispersed, Jianqin's eyes narrowed. He could clearly sense specks that resembled starlight remain in his body when the 4 strands of sword qi dispersed. As soon as he sensed it, the comprehension of the way of the sword permeated Jianqin's mind. The way of the sword. Jianqin's eyes became extremely bright. They were filled with excitement and joy. Even though he was heavily injured at that moment, his heart still began to thump uncontrollably. After the 4 strands of sword qi dispersed, there's actually some mysterious specks of light that contain the comprehension of the way of the sword in my body. If I absorb the comprehension, it'll definitely be of great help to me, Jianqin thought. However, he also understood that this was not the time to comprehend the way of the sword. With a thought, a gentle white light immediately enveloped his body. As he bathed in the gentle white light, Jianqin's wounds actually healed at a visible rate. It was so fast that it was astounding. Chaotic force surged within Jianqin's body. Jianqin pushed the supreme recovery of the chaotic body to the limit as well. He healed as quickly as he could with both of them. After the 10-meter-tall pagoda unleashed this attack, it dissipated due to the depletion of energy. The red-robed boy's figure disappeared with the pagoda. You really don't have that old bastard's sword qi anymore. The red-robed boy's voice rang out. Another red-robed boy walked out from behind the illusionary heavenly palace of Bishing. Compared to the previous 2, the presence he gave off was even more tremendous. The red-robed boy feared the nirvanic immortal exalt's sword qi very much. In order to exhaust the sword qi on Jianqin, he had used his first clone. However, he was still worried that Jianqin still had the nirvanic immortal exalt's sword qi, so he used his second clone. The two clones were both condensed from his energy. The second clone had consumed a large amount of his energy, so the second clone was as real as his real body, both in terms of strength and presence. Although it could only deal a single strike at late reciprocity, the red-robed boy believed that the second clone was enough to test whether Jianqin still had the nirvanic immortal exalt's sword qi or not. In particular, when he saw Jianqin heel on the ground like a pile of mud after having almost died to his second clone, the red-robed boy was finally certain that Jianqin had used up all his sword qi. I have to pay a very great price to condense a clone under that old bastard suppression, and it's very difficult to recover. If it weren't for the fact that I wanted to test whether he still had the nirvanic immortal exalt's sword qi or not, I really wouldn't want to waste my clone to deal with him. However, he no longer has the nirvanic immortal exalt's sword qi, so it's time for me to kill him. The red-robed boy smiled victoriously as he slowly made his way towards Jianqin. Immediately, an indescribably tremendous pressure radiated from his body. The pressure was several times more powerful than his second clone. The figure of an ancient tower conjured up from the red-robed boy's body. As soon as the ancient pagoda appeared, the world changed color and the wind and clouds surged. In front of the ancient pagoda, the laws of the world seemed to become somewhat chaotic. The ancient pagoda faintly contained the two laws of creation and destruction. Moreover, under the two laws of creation and destruction, there was also the scorching and violent power of the law of fire. The Anita tower that the red-robed boy had conjured actually possessed the power of three laws. However, the red-robed boy could only use a sliver of the laws of destruction because the Anita tower was damaged. It was no longer the complete Anita tower. At that moment, the red-robed boy seemed to be able to see Jianqin's death. He could not help but laugh aloud. So what if you become a taboo in the future? You still haven't matured. Today, I will personally kill this taboo. With that, the red-robed boy extended a finger at Jianqin. A dark light immediately condensed from the illusionary tower, shooting towards Jianqin as a black streak of light. When I was in peak condition, this strike alone would have been enough to destroy an entire region. Although it's greatly weakened now, it's still an honor for you to die to this strike. The red-robed boy laughed aloud. However, when the black streak of light shot towards Jianqin with the power of the laws of destruction, a terrifying sword qi that even shocked the red-robed boy suddenly appeared. 8 strands of sword qi had shot out from Jianqin's arm at that moment. Every single strand of sword qi was extremely powerful. They also possessed the power of laws, the laws of the way of the sword. That old bastard's sword qi. How can you still have it? Bastard, since you still have that old bastard sword qi, why would you rather die than use it earlier? The red-robed boy's face suddenly changed. Disbelief filled his eyes. The 8 strands of sword qi moved extremely quickly, as if they had crossed through time and space. They were far faster than the dark light from the tower. When the first strand of sword qi collided with the dark light from the tower, the sword qi silently collapsed. The dark light was far more powerful than any of the strands of sword qi, but with the obstruction, the dark light that shot towards Jianqin paused and slowed down slightly. The other 7 strands of sword qi all shot towards the red-robed boy. They were so fast that the red-robed boy lost all ability to dodge or block. In the blink of an eye, all 7 strands of sword qi passed through the red-robed boy, causing him to shriek out miserably. His face became extremely vicious and filled with deep fear. This was fear towards the nirvanic immortal exalt. Even though the red-robed boy's original body was extremely powerful on the 9th floor, having reached godhood, The 7 strands of sword chi that possessed the power of laws from the way of the sword were fused with the power of laws. They were enough to threaten his life. After enduring the attacks from the 7 strands of sword chi, the red-robed boy immediately became illusionary as he shrieked out miserably. He had almost been dispersed by the sword chi. Even though the red-robed boy did not directly disperse after suffering a fatal wound, his presence rapidly declined like a deflated balloon. In the blink of an eye, he fell from godhood. Strands of sword chi seemed to remain in his illusionary body, causing him to be in pain. He constantly shrieked out as his illusionary body trembled violently. Chapter 1492. With a flash of violet light, the Ziying's sword shot out from the ground, blocking the dark light with its body. Ding! The dark light collided with the Ziying's sword. With a thrum, the Ziying's sword was knocked far away, but the dark light did not disperse. It continued towards Jianqin. With a flash of azure light, the Qing Suwa sword flew out from the ground as well. It blocked the dark light with its body just like the Ziying sword, but in the end it was knocked away by the dark light with a thrum. After being obstructed several times, the dark light bought precious time for Jianqin. At this moment, Jianqin's wounds had mostly recovered from the dual healing. All his bones had been reconnected, so he endured the pain and immediately leapt up. He used the illusory flash, leaving behind an afterimage as he appeared 100 meters away. Boom! As soon as Jianqin dodged, the dark light struck where he had been lying. With a great boom, the entire ground shook violently. Terrifying ripples of energy erupted, wreaking havoc in the surroundings as a storm. It blew Jianqin 100 meters away. This time, Jianshan was blown several dozen kilometers away by the shockwave of energy before crashing heavily onto the ground. Many of his bones were broken, and his wounds that had just recovered from a small portion of his injuries were injured once more. Jianqin basically climbed to his feet as soon as he hit the ground. Without any hesitation, he charged towards the tower spirit as quickly as he could. Along the way, origin energy of radiant saint force enveloped his body the entire time. With the circulation of chaotic force in his body, his wounds healed at an extremely rapid rate. The tower spirit is still alive. I need to kill it in a single stroke while it's injured, just in case something happens. Jianqin gritted his teeth and persevered. He ignored the pain and flew in the direction of the tower spirit as quickly as he could. Several dozen kilometers passed in the blink of an eye. When Jianqin arrived before the heavenly palace of Bixing again, he had recovered by 40%. The tower spirit had just purged the remaining sword chi in its body as well. It stared at Jianqin with a sunken face. Although its strength had fallen below godhood, it still pressured Jianqin tremendously. Bastard, this is my last body, yet you've injured me so heavily. Even if I kill you, I won't be able to get rid of the hatred in my heart. The red-robed boy had completely lost his mind. The killing intent in his eyes had reached the limit. I will destroy your body and extract your soul so that it will suffer the most painful torture in the world. I will never be able to reincarnate. I will use everything I have to make you taste the most intense pain in the world. The red-robed boy roared at the sky. The hatred in his heart was enough to drown out space and shake up the surroundings. The illusionary tower hovered around the red-robed boy once again. It also possessed the power of 3 laws. Afterwards, he spread his arms and used all his strength to gather the remaining power on the 9th floor, pouring it into the tower. Immediately, the tower's power skyrocketed. For illusionary swords that were over 30,000 meters long hovered in the shattered darkness of the 9th floor. However, at this moment, the 4 swords trembled gently and flickered with a faint light. Immediately, even more power erupted from the swords, suppressing the power of the tower on the 9th floor. As a result, the tower spirit could only use a limited amount of the tower's power. It was extremely difficult for him to do so. Even though the power of the tower was suppressed, The power that the red-robed boy could use still increased by a lot. At the same time, he did not hesitate to pour a strand of his origin energy into the tower before controlling it to crush Jianchen. Although the tower was illusionary and did not possess a physical body, Jianchen did not dare to underestimate it. Instead, he became stern. Although the illusionary tower was not as powerful as the previous attack, it still gave Jianchen a sense of imminent danger. This attack is no weaker than reciprocity. Jianchen estimated the power of the tower. He knew that the attack was not something he could withstand while heavily injured. Moreover, the amulet swords were not in his hands, so he was unable to fend off the attack with his own strength. Jianchen showed no fear at all. A gleam of light flashed through his eyes, and another 8 strands of sword qi shot out from his arm to receive the tower. They were also sword qi left behind by the Nirvanic immortal exalt. Jianchen had obtained the sword of mortality, the sword of reincarnation, the sword of slaughter, and the sword of annihilation on the 9th floor of the Inata Tower. Each strand of sword qi could unleash the might of reciprocity 3 times. After that, the power of the sword qi would decrease. Jianchen was currently using the weakened sword qi, which possessed the might of returnance. Although the 8 strands of sword qi only possessed the might of returnance, they were no weaker than reciprocity when combined. Boom! The 8 strands of sword qi collided with the tower, erupting with a great boom. Violent ripples of energy forced Jianchen back, while the 8 strands of sword qi and the figure of the tower dispersed at the same time. God damn it, you actually still have that old bastard sword qi. Although the power of the sword qi has decreased, it's still something that the old bastard left behind when he was still alive. The red-robed boy cried out furiously. After retreating a certain distance, Jianchen forcefully stabilized himself. He had already recovered by 50%. Looking at the devastating storm of energy up ahead, he gritted his teeth and directly charged over. He passed through the storm of energy as quickly as he could and arrived before the red-robed boy. With a wave of his hand, he shot out 4 strands of sword qi. The 4 strands of sword qi were shrunken versions of the 4 swords of the Nirvanic immortal exalt. Every single strand of sword qi was the length of a hand, but their power had decreased from returnance to reciprocity. However, the comprehension of the way of the sword within the sword qi was still greater than Jianchen's. After using the 4 strands of sword qi, the sword qi hidden in Jianchen's arm dimmed. Its energy had basically been depleted. Spurt, 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 spurt. The 4 strands of sword qi with the might of origin pierced the red-robed boy's body at the same time, causing him to tremble violently. He became slightly more illusionary once again. At the same time, the red-robed boy waved his hand and shot out a black streak of light with the power of the laws of destruction. It pierced Jianchen's body, causing Jianchen to vomit blood. The power of the laws of destruction wildly destroyed Jianchen's flesh around the wound, causing it to dissolve and rapidly expand. Jianchen gritted his teeth as hatred filled his eyes. He glared at the red-robed boy and used the light to protect himself. At the same time, he used the sword qi to fend off the power of the laws of destruction. He condensed a sword with sword qi in his right hand again and swung it at the red-robed boy viciously. The red-robed boy's body trembled violently as the madness in his eyes became even heavier. His face became extremely vicious as he constantly swung his fists at Jianchen. Every single punch contained a sliver of the power of the laws of destruction. He struck Jianchen again and again, producing heavy thuds. Jianchen's face was sheet white as blood constantly flowed from his mouth. The sword qi condensed in his hand constantly swung at the red-robed boy. With every swing, the boy's illusionary body would violently tremble and dim. In the end, the azulite swords flew over from afar. With shocking sword qi, they pierced the boy as streaks of light. Whether it was Jianchen or the red-robed boy, They were both extremely heavily injured. Both of them were extremely weak, unable to use any secret techniques. The Ziying sword had already returned to Jianshin's hand. Jianshin wielded the Ziying sword. Coupled with the sword origin, he was able to unleash strength no weaker than late Receival. After several swings, he had almost dispersed the boy's figure. However, he had paid an extremely heavy price as well. There was not a single part of his body that was unscathed after enduring the boy's vicious attacks. At the same time, the power of the laws of destruction wreaked havoc within him, eating away at his flesh and blood. Jianshin had already lost his right arm and half his body. Even a third of his head had shattered, almost injuring his soul. His entire body was covered in blood, making it a horrible sight. However, he still did not give up. He used his remaining right arm to hold the Ziying sword and swung it at the boy. The Qing Suo sword did not stop either. Under the control of the sword spirit, it constantly pierced through the boy. The battle between the two sides was extremely intense. It had already reached a state of close combat. The boy's figure had almost dispersed, while Jianshin's body was about to collapse. He was just far too heavily injured. If it were not for the support of the chaotic body, he probably would have died long ago. The red-robed boy roared out furiously. His eyes were filled with resentment as he roared. I never thought about using this move because it was my last hope of escaping. However, it's no longer up to me now. The boy suddenly pointed at the sky, and a droplet of golden blood gradually appeared. Immediately, an unbelievably powerful ripple of energy radiated out. Jianshin's face suddenly changed when he saw the droplet of golden blood. Just the ripples of energy from the golden blood made him feel like it was the end of the world. It was as if the droplet of blood possessed the power to destroy the world. Is this the blood of the Anatta Grand Prime? Jianshin was sheet white. The droplet of blood filled him with despair. Even if he was in peak condition, he would not have any chance of survival before the droplet of blood, let alone now that he was heavily injured. The essence blood of an immortal emperor. The sword spirits cried out as well. Isn't this the blood of a Grand Prime? But even if it's not a Grand Prime's blood, it's still not something I can block. Jianshin stopped attacking the tower spirit and looked at the droplet of essence blood in the sky. Before the essence blood, escaping was nothing more than wishful thinking. This is a droplet of essence blood from Master's traitorous disciple, Taji. When Master was heavily injured by the nirvanic immortal exalt and fled, she was ambushed by that traitorous disciple of hers. In the end, Master killed Taji. Taji's essence blood is left here, and I've kept it all this time. Originally, I wanted to use that essence blood to break through the sword formation once that bastard suppression was exhausted, but I never thought that I would have to use it on an ant like you in the end. As he said that, the red-robed boy had already calmed down. He seemed like he was ready to face death with equanimity. Boom! At the same time, the drop of immortal Emperor blood essence also exploded. A destructive energy swept through the world, devouring the void and crushing down towards the ground. Chapter 1493. However, just when the destructive power was about to reach Jianshin, Jianshin suddenly took out a damaged piece of armor from his space ring and equipped himself. Taji's God artifact armor. The boy immediately cried out when he saw the damaged armor. Disbelief filled his face, and soon afterwards he and Jianshin were swallowed by the destructive power. After who knows how long, the destructive power from the droplet of essence blood had completely dispersed on the 9th floor of the Anatta Tower. The entire world returned to peace at that moment. The 9th floor of the Anatta Tower still existed. The explosion of the essence blood was like a ripple in the ocean to the Anatta Tower. It was unable to harm the tower at all. The sky remained the same color as before. The figure of the heavenly palace of Bishing continued to shine with dazzling golden light as it stood there. Perhaps only the cracked ground clearly recorded the devastation from before. Jianqin and the boy had vanished as well. Their presences could not be found on the 9th floor at all. Only a damaged piece of armor covered in dirt lay on the ground, silently. The person who wore the armor had vanished. However, at this moment, a speck of divine light suddenly flickered within the dust-covered, broken armor. In the next moment, a beam of light flew out from the broken armor and hovered in the air. Only now did he see that it was a human figure. It was only as tall as a finger and gave off a layer of white light. This was the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force. A speck of golden light flickered within the body of the tiny figure. Upon closer inspection, it was actually a small golden tower. Naturally, this was Jianqin's soul. When the essence blood exploded, he was unable to protect himself even with the damaged god artifact armor. His body was destroyed, and in the final moment, his soul hid in the damaged god artifact armor, which was why he managed to survive by luck. Jianqin's soul hovered in the air. After looking around, he sat down. A few seconds later, the thrum of swords rang out. The Ziying sword and the Qing Suo sword shot through the dust and flew out from the ground. They produced clear thrum as they arrived beside Jianqin's soul. They were on guard. Afterwards, another object covered in blood flew out from the dust and hovered below Jianqin's soul. To no surprise, it was a piece of Jianqin's flesh. After the first piece of flesh flew out, the dust in the surroundings began to churn. Piece after piece of flesh flew out from the dust, all of them hovering below Jianqin's soul in the end. As more and more flesh gathered from all directions, a body completely composed of chunks of flesh of various sizes gradually appeared below Jianqin's soul. It was covered in blood, and every single droplet of blood pulsed with powerful energy. Jianqin's soul lowered his head and looked at the body completely composed of chunks of flesh. He shook his head and sighed. He had already tried his best to collect his own flesh, but a portion of it had been destroyed by the power of the laws of destruction. It had completely vanished, so it was impossible to find it. He had collected all the flesh he could sense, but he could only piece together half of his body. He needed to recondense the remaining portion with his own power. Fortunately, the regenerative abilities of the chaotic body were extremely great. Coupled with his abilities as a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master, it was not difficult for him to make a full recovery. With a thought, a strand of Class 9 Radiant Saint Master origin energy immediately flew out from his faintly glowing soul. It enveloped his damaged body in an extremely dense, milky white light. The chaotic Niden within him spat out strands of chaotic force. The chaotic force flowed through every part of his body. Not only could it stimulate the growth of his flesh and blood, but it could also increase the rate at which he healed at the same time. Under the dual healing of the chaotic force and Class 9 origin energy, the missing parts of Jianqin's body began to regrow slowly. At the same time, the cracks and wounds on his body began to disappear at a visible rate. Even his blood flowed backwards, returning to his flesh. At the same time, the blood of chaos that had yet to dry up in the dust all turned into streams that surged out of the ground. It was all sucked into Jianqin's mouth. The blood of chaos was extremely important to Jianqin. Although he could regenerate the blood of chaos with the regenerative abilities of the chaotic body, it would consume a large amount of chaotic force. Jianqin would not have cared if he had only lost a small amount of blood. However, basically all of his blood had spilled into the ground now, so he needed to retrieve it. Fortunately, he cultivated the chaotic body, so he was mentally connected to every bit of his flesh and blood. It was not difficult for him to retrieve it. This time, Jianqin's wounds were unprecedentedly severe. Only his soul remained. If it were not for the fact that his soul had hidden itself in the damaged armor at the crucial moment, he probably would have died on the 9th floor already. The battle against the tower spirit this time was truly life-threatening. It had been a very long time since Jianqin had faced death at such a close distance. At the same time, the recovery this time took far more time than any other time. Finally, Jianqin made a full recovery 2 days later. Jianqin had used up 3 strands of Class 9 origin energy. Jianqin took out his space ring from the artifact space and slowly put it on his hand. Afterwards, he took out a set of clothes from the space ring and changed into them. He silently sensed the body he had just recovered, and very soon, he discovered that the remnant comprehension of the laws of the sword had not disappeared with the destruction of his body, which allowed him to let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, he discovered that the 4 strands of sword chi were hidden in his right arm as well. However, due to the exhaustion of energy, the 4 strands of sword chi were unable to unleash their full power. Even if they could barely unleash an attack at the receival level, it would not be as powerful as a strike from Jianqin's Ziying sword. The artifact spirit should have dispersed from the explosion of the immortal emperor's essence blood. After all, the artifact spirit has become extremely weak after the battle with me. He was extremely close to me at the very end, so he was unable to dodge the explosion of the essence blood, Jianqin thought. Even though the battle with the artifact spirit had been extremely intense, he was a Class 9, Radiant Saint Master. As long as his soul remained intact, he would be able to recover very quickly with the recovery of his Class 9, Radiant Saint Force origin energy. He would not be like regular experts who would need to rely on healing pills and a long period of time to recover once they were heavily injured. Jianqin possessed a huge advantage in this aspect. He did not need to fear being injured at all when fighting. He could even recover during battle. Jianqin picked up the damaged armor that had saved his life and gently patted off the dust on it. He could not help but think about what the tower spirit had said when he took out the immortal emperor's essence blood, and how shocked the tower spirit had been when he saw the armor at the final moment after the essence blood had exploded. The owner of this armor is called Taji. I never thought that he would actually be the Inata, Grand Prime's disciple. It looks like the immortal emperor's flesh scattered across the sea of despair came from Taji, Jianqin thought. He pondered. It looks like the Inata Grand Prime and his disciple had a great battle here in the past. The Inata Grand Prime probably died in that battle, which is why the Inata Tower ended up here. If the Inata Grand Prime hasn't died, he should have recovered a certain amount of strength after all this time. It won't be difficult for him to break through the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt seal on the Inata Tower. After a moment of thought, Jianqin dismissed his thoughts. He looked at the projection of the heavenly palace of Bixing nearby. Vaguely, he seemed to see a pure white stone tablet standing within the palace. The stone tablet was real and not illusionary. It was as if it originally existed on the 9th floor of the Inata Tower before being enveloped by the heavenly palace of Bixing. As a result, it seemed like the stone tablet had been placed within the heavenly palace of Bixing. Jianqin made his way to the heavenly palace of Bixing. There were a total of 999 stone steps before the palace. The stone steps were illusionary, and he could clearly see the ground below through them. Jianqin hesitated for a while as he stood before the illusionary steps. He attempted to climb up, but to his surprise, even though the stone steps were illusionary, he felt like he was standing on solid ground when he stepped on them. Jianqin made his way up the illusionary stairs, step by step. He entered the heavenly palace without any obstructions. He directly made his way to the jade white stone tablet he had seen before. The stone tablet was as white as jade and as smooth as a mirror. It was 300 meters tall. Jianqin felt like an ant standing before an elephant when he stood before it. Master, this should be the core of the Inata Tower. Open up your mind and use your senses to sense the stone tablet. The sword zither's voice rang out. At this moment, the 2 swords slowly revolved around Jianqin, protecting Jianqin. Jianqin closed his eyes and opened up his mind. He slowly approached the stone tablet with his senses. His senses successfully seeped into the stone tablet, and immediately a message appeared. Jianqin opened his eyes and looked at the stone tablet. Excitement filled his eyes. The stone tablet was crucial to controlling the Inata Tower. He had obtained the method to refine it from the stone tablet. Chapter 1494. Senior Tianjian spent 10 years refining the supreme divine hall of Mercenary City with the Holy Emperor's strength. The Inata Tower is clearly at a much higher grade than the supreme divine hall. I wonder how long it'll take me to refine the first layer of the Inata Tower with my current strength. Jianqin pondered inside as he hesitated. There were only 2 or 3 years until the invasion of the foreign world. He did not know if he could refine the first layer of the Inata Tower in that time. Don't worry, Master. The Inata Tower may be a supreme quality god artifact, but refining it is divided into 9 steps. With Master's current strength, you really can't refine the entire tower, but if you refine the first layer with Qing Suaz and my assistance, it shouldn't take you long, said Ziying. Ziying's sword arrived above Jianqin's head and transformed into a handsome young man in violet robes. Master, we'll assist you. Qing Sua's sword also arrived above Jianqin's head and transformed into a beautiful woman in an azure dress. Jianqin gritted his teeth and said, If that's the case, I'll try and see if I can take the Inata Tower out before the invasion. Jianqin immediately sat down and began to refine the stone tablet with the assistance of the sword spirits. As Jianqin refined it, the 300-meter-tall stone tablet before him immediately began to change. The bottom of the jade-white tablet gradually turned black, and the blackness continued to spread upwards at an extremely slow rate. The black part was the part that Jianqin had successfully refined. When the stone tablet turned completely black, it meant that he would become the second true master of the Inata Tower after the Inata Grand Prime. However, the further he went, the more difficult it became to refine the stone tablet. When the black color on the stone tablet had spread to a height of 1 zhang, the speed at which he was refining it had clearly slowed down. Unknowingly, Jianqin had already refined the stone tablet for a year. During that year, he had refined 9 floors of the first layer of the Inata Tower. However, the final floor was unimaginably difficult to refine. Jianqin used all his strength, but his progress was extremely slow. However, Jianqin did not give up. He continued to refine it as hard as he could. Finally, after half a year, he successfully refined the final floor, allowing the blackness to reach 1/9 of the stone tablet. This meant that Jianqin had successfully refined the first layer of the Inata Tower. He could gain basic control over the tower now. Jianqin slowly opened his eyes. His forehead was covered in fine beads of sweat. Even though he was extremely exhausted, there was uncontainable excitement in his eyes. At this moment, he could clearly sense that he had established a mental connection with the Inata Tower. He could vaguely sense everything on each of the 9 floors of the Inata Tower. However, he could only vaguely sense everything on the 2nd to 9th floors. His senses on the first floor were extremely clear. He could even vaguely sense the dark world that the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt had destroyed. The destroyed dark world was as vast as space to Jianqin. It was unimaginably large. The Tianyuan continent was not even 100th the size of it. The 9th floor really does contain the Inata Grand Prime's treasury. Jianqin murmured to himself. His eyes lit up, and he appeared 100 meters away as if he had teleported. He stared at the empty space before him. The treasury has been hidden by the Inata Grand Prime in a spatial crack on the 9th floor. Even the tower spirit can't open it. Only the master of the tower can open it. It's a pity that I'm too weak right now, so I can't open it. Sigh. Jianqin sighed gently. He was greatly disappointed. With a flash, he returned to the heavenly palace of Bixing. I can't sense the existence of the heavenly palace at all. It must be a projection left behind by the Inata Grand Prime through her abilities in the past. Jianqin studied the palace for a while before striding in. A while later, Jianqin arrived in a hall within the heavenly palace. He stood at the entrance and stared ahead. There was a white jade platform at the end of the hall. It was only the size of a millstone and seemed more like a cushion for meditation. Jianqin stared at the platform for a while before looking behind it. There was a statue there. It was a statue of a woman. Her body was wrapped in a white dress, and her figure was exquisite. Her beautiful face was indescribably beautiful. She stood there with her head slightly raised, as if she was staring at the void. Perhaps one could not sense any shocking aura from her, but she gave off a feeling that she was one with heaven and earth and had blended with the great path. It was as if she was no longer a person, but had become the great path of heaven and earth, forming a kind of rule. Who is that person? Is she the Anata Grand Prime? Jianqin stood at the entrance as he stared at the woman in a daze. He found it very difficult to believe that the Anata Grand Prime, who ranked in the top 3 in the Saints world, was actually a woman. Ziying and Qing Sua appeared as well. They also stared at the statue in a daze. A while later, Ziying said, although the old master had clashed with the Anata Grand Prime several times in the past, the Anata Grand Prime was shrouded in ways which made his figure hazy. Basically, no one in our immortals world has ever seen the Anata Grand Prime's true form. His voice has fused with the ways as well, becoming a tune that encompasses everything in the world. It's impossible to tell whether he's male or female. In reality, even in the Saints world, there are many Grand Primes who have never seen the Anata Grand Prime's true form. The heavenly palace of Bishing is the residence of the Anata Grand Prime. That's true, but there's a statue in the Anata Grand Prime's residence. Is this the Anata Grand Prime's true form? Or is this woman the most important person in the Anata Grand Prime's heart? Qing Sua frowned slightly as he stared at the statue, curiously. Sigh. At this moment, an obscure sigh echoed through the illusionary heavenly palace of Bishing. It was the voice of a woman. It was gentle and beautiful, like the music of immortals. It was enough to raise people's spirits and give off a sense of vicissitudes. When Jianqin heard the voice, he immediately became surprised. He looked around, but he did not see anyone at all, nor did he sense where the voice came from. It was as if the voice echoed through the entire heavenly palace of Bishing, or even the entire 9th floor of the Anata Tower. Ziying and Qing Sua's eyes narrowed as well. They had also heard the sigh. They looked around, but they did not discover anything either. It's not the voice of the Anata Tower spirit, nor is it the voice of the Anata Grand Prime we're familiar with. It's definitely not the voice of the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, Ziying said sternly. May I ask who you are? Jianqin asked. He looked around cautiously. He could already vaguely sense everything on the 9th floor of the Anata Tower. Only the heavenly palace of Bishing exceeded his senses. The senses of his soul were suppressed here as well, completely useless. I've waited here for over 3 million years. Finally, someone has come. You are the first person to come here in over 3 million years. The obscure voice rang out once again, echoing through the entire heavenly palace of Bishing. It was difficult to locate where the voice came from, but this time, as he spoke, a white, blurry figure gradually appeared beside the statue at the end of the hall. The figure was very hazy in the beginning, where only a rough figure could be seen. However, it gradually cleared up after it appeared. In the end, it was finally possible to make out her appearance. She was exactly the same as the statue. Not only was her bearing the same, but even her bearing was the same. Jianqin looked at the figure and was greatly shocked. He carefully glanced at the twin swords and immediately became rather uneasy. He asked sternly, "Are you the Anata Grand Prime?" "I am Anata," the figure gently replied. However, she looked into the distance as she reminisced about the past with mixed feelings. Jianqin's heart sank as his face became extremely ugly. He had never thought that he would actually encounter the Anata Grand Prime here. Even though he could tell that the figure was probably a clone of the Anata Grand Prime, it was still extremely bad news to him. He refused to believe that the Anata Grand Prime could not recognize the twin swords. Possessing the twin swords was equivalent to revealing his relationship with the immortals world. The Anata Grand Prime might even believe that he was a part of the Immortals' world. The Immortals' world and the Saints' world were enemies, and the Inita Grand Prime had even fought against the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt in the past. This would be extremely disadvantageous for him. As a matter of fact, the fact that he was related to the Immortals' world would spread through the Saints' world. Jianqin could already imagine how he would be hunted down once he went to the Saints' world. Jianqin's face sank as the light in his eyes flickered. At that moment, he was tempted to disperse the Inita Grand Prime's figure, but he did not know the strength of the Inita Grand Prime's clone, so he did not act rashly. The Inita Grand Prime did not seem to notice the change in Jianqin's expression. She continued to stare at the sky in the distance as she said gloomily, "In the past, I fought against the greatest expert of the Immortals' world, the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. I was unable to defeat him and had to flee with heavy injuries. Just as I was making my way back to the Saints' world, my disciple, Taji, suddenly launched a sneak attack on me. I was caught off guard and allowed the sneak attack to succeed, worsening my injuries. It was also at that moment that I suddenly understood that my disciple was secretly working with the Grand Prime, Yanzun, to kill me while I was heavily injured, so that he could steal my comprehension of the laws of fire." Chapter 1495. Jianqin gasped when he heard that. At that moment, his gaze towards the Inita Grand Prime underwent a drastic change. The woman had fought the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt and was heavily injured, unable to use the Inita Tower. Afterwards, the Immortal Emperor Ta Ji launched a sneak attack on her, worsening her injuries. Yet, she was still able to defeat a Grand Prime of the Saints' world under such circumstances. Just how shocking was her strength! After that battle, my injuries were so severe that my soul dispersed. I died in a spatial crack. In the final moment, I sent a sliver of my soul into the Inita Tower to leave behind my legacy, so that my legacy would not end. You, on the other hand, are the first person to arrive here after I've been waiting here for over 3 million years. Since you're able to arrive here, it means that you're fated with me. The inheritance belongs to you. It doesn't matter if you're from the immortal dimension or not. The Inita Grand Prime's legacy. Jianqin was stunned. Disbelief filled his face. His connection to the Immortals' world had been exposed. Yet not only did the Inita Grand Prime not care about that, but she even gave her legacy to him. It was like a pie had fallen from the sky. The Inita Grand Prime's condition is probably terrible right now. After all, this sliver of her soul has existed here for over 3 million years. It should be about to disperse soon, which is why she chose me as her successor. Jianqin understood when he thought up to there. If that were not the case, he would never have believed that the Inita Grand Prime would be willing to leave her legacy to someone from the Immortals' world. She probably had her reasons for doing this. The Inita Tower is suppressed by the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. My soul will weaken with each passing day, and it's about to run out now. I don't have much time left, so I'll formally bestow my legacy to you. My only request is that you go to the Saints' world to kill the Grand Prime, Yan Zun, once you have enough strength. Are you willing to do so? Towards the end, the Inita Grand Prime's eyes shone with a shocking light as she stared at Jianqin. Her voice became extremely stern when she said, "Are you willing?" Jianqin clasped his hands at the Inita Grand Prime. He said sternly and firmly, "Don't worry, Senior. If I obtain Senior's legacy, I will definitely kill Grand Prime Yanzun and avenge Senior once I have enough strength." The Inita Grand Prime nodded in satisfaction when she heard Jianqin's oath. Her shocking gaze calmed down once again, and she said, "I have 2 legacies. The first is the Fortune Jade Pedestal, which contains my cultivation method and some comprehension. Not everyone can practice this cultivation method. Only those who are fated can obtain it. The second is my extreme comprehension of laws. I have comprehended the laws of fire, creation, and destruction to the limit. This bead contains my extreme comprehension of the laws of destruction. I will pass it on to you. Fuse the bead into your soul, and you will be able to comprehend my laws of destruction. Comprehending laws is crucial to reaching godhood. If you reach the peak of reciprocity, only by comprehending laws can you reach godhood. Otherwise, you will never be able to make any progress and will remain in the origin realm forever. The first layer of laws is deity, the 10th layer is God, the 20th layer is over God, the 30th layer is divine king, the 45th layer is infinite prime, and the 60th layer is chaotic prime. If you can comprehend the 80th layer of laws, you will become a grand prime. If you can comprehend the 100th layer, you will become a peak grand prime. Even with the entire saints world in perspective, there were only a few peak grand primes. The laws of destruction I have left you are the extreme. How much you can comprehend will depend on your fortune. With that, a thumb-sized black bead slowly drifted over. In the end, it stopped before Jianshan. Immediately, the bead radiated with the power of the laws of destruction. Jianshan was unable to contain his excitement as he stared at the black bead. He slowly extended his hand towards it. At that moment, the Anata Grand Prime was no longer staring into the distance. Instead, she stared at Jianshan. A sliver of eagerness appeared in her eyes, as well as a sliver of hidden excitement. However, it disappeared in the blink of an eye. She had hidden it away. Finally, Jianshan gently grasped the bead. He sensed the slightly familiar power of the laws of destruction, and a strange light immediately flickered through his eyes. Excitement appeared in the depths of the Anata Grand Prime's eyes the moment Jianshan grasped the bead. There was a sliver of viciousness hidden within as well, but it only appeared for a split second before vanishing. Her eyes became calm again. They were extremely deep. Jianshan tightened his grip on the black bead. He did not fuse the bead into his soul immediately. Instead, he took out a wooden box from his space ring. Under the Anata Grand Prime's confused gaze, he slowly placed the black bead into the wooden box before tossing it into his space ring. The Anata Grand Prime's eyes narrowed by an undetectable amount. She could not help but ask, "You need to fuse the bead into your soul to comprehend the limits of my laws of destruction. May I ask why? Don't you want to comprehend the limits of my laws of destruction?" Jianshan showed respect. He clasped his hands at the Anata Grand Prime and said, "Senior, you've misunderstood. It's not that I don't want to comprehend Senior's laws of destruction, but I believe that comprehending the limits of the laws of destruction right now is rather inappropriate. I plan on finding a quiet place to comprehend them in the future." "What's inappropriate about that?" "No one can disturb you in the Anata Tower. If you go outside, it'll be even easier to disturb you. At the same time, comprehending laws is of utmost importance. If you're disturbed during the process of comprehending laws, causing your comprehension to be forcefully interrupted, you will suffer extremely severe injuries. In severe cases, you might even suffer a backlash from the laws, causing your soul to disperse." The Anata Grand Prime said sternly, "Thank you for your warning, Senior. I am extremely grateful, but I've stayed in the Anata Tower for far too long already. There are still important matters I need to deal with outside, so I can't stay here for too long. If I comprehend the laws now, I'm afraid I'll be delayed and end up ruining the important matters," Jianshan said calmly. He was neither servile nor overbearing. He stared at the Anata Grand Prime with brimming interest. The Anata Grand Prime's figure had already become extremely faint. It seemed like she would disperse soon. After a moment of silence, the Anata Grand Prime said slowly, "If that's the case, I won't rush you. However, you must remember to fuse the pearl of laws into your soul as soon as possible so that you can comprehend my laws as soon as possible so that you can go to the saints' world and kill the Grand Prime Yenzun." With that, the Anata Grand Prime's figure slowly dispersed under Jianshan's gaze. After the Anata Grand Prime's figure completely vanished, Jianshan slowly arrived before the statue, cautiously. He studied it for quite a while and frowned silently. "Ziying, Qing Sua, do you think the Anata Grand Prime has really dispersed, or has she continued to hide? Jianqin asked the sword spirits secretly. Only the two of them could hear his voice. It would not spread. The sword spirits did not reply. After a while of silence, Qing Sua's voice rang out in Jianqin's head. Master, she doesn't seem like the Neta Grand Prime we remember. Master, I also suspect that she's not the real Neta Grand Prime. Although we've never seen the Neta Grand Prime's true appearance before, our instincts can't be wrong. Zi Ying expressed his opinion as well. They communicated through communication techniques, so their voices did not spread out. Jianqin said calmly, so you've seen through it? That's right. That Anita Grand Prime really isn't the real Anita Grand Prime, because I saw a sliver of familiarity in her eyes when she gave me the Pearl of Laws of Destruction. Even though she hid it very well, I just happened to catch it. The familiar gaze is extremely similar to the Tower Spirits. Is she the Anita Tower Spirit? It's a pity that we can't sense the Tower Spirit's presence in the heavenly palace of Bixing, or we would be able to recognize him with a single glance no matter what he takes on, said Ziying. It doesn't matter if she's the Tower Spirit or the Anita Grand Prime's disciple, Taji. Either way, the Pearl of Laws of Destruction she gave me can't be used. There's definitely something wrong with it, Jianqin said coldly. A vicious light flashed through his eyes. He did not care about the fake Anita Grand Prime's experiences. Afterwards, Jianqin looked at the fortune jade seat before the statue. It was only the size of a millstone and 3 inches tall. It was pure white and shone with a gentle white light. When Jianqin approached the seat, he could sense a refreshing presence radiating from it. Just a small whiff of it was enough to make him feel refreshed and energized. It was as if his soul had become even more consolidated at that moment. Master, this fortune jade is a top-grade treasure of heaven and earth. It's extremely rare. If you wear a piece of fortune jade while cultivating, not only can it increase your cultivation speed, it can also help you comprehend the Tao. It's similar to the Enlightenment Ancient Tea Tree, but its effect is inferior to that of the Enlightenment Ancient Tea Tree. I just never thought that the Anita Grand Prime would possess such a large piece of fortune jade. Fortune jade is so valuable that even the old master, one of the 5 grand exalts of the immortals world, did not possess one. Among the 5 grand exalts of the immortals world, only the Nirvanic immortal exalt possessed one. However, it's not even a third of the size of this piece of fortune jade. Qing Sua said enviously before gently sighing. He was filled with pity because the fortune jade seat before him was also an illusion. It was only a projection, just like the heavenly palace of Bixing. Jianqin was immediately tempted, but he could only sigh helplessly. This Anata Grand Prime sure is capable. This fortune jade seat is only a projection, yet it possesses the same effects as the real thing. Sigh, if only this fortune jade seat were real. With this item, it would be much easier for me to comprehend the way of the sword. After pausing for a while, he asked, the fake Anita Grand Prime said that the fortune jade seat contains the Anita Grand Prime's cultivation method and some comprehension of cultivation. Ziying, Qing Sua, do you think this is fake? Jianqin became much more cautious after discovering that the Anita Grand Prime's projection was fake. He did not dare to believe anything that had to do with legacies so easily. Chapter 1496. Master, I think what the fake Anita Grand Prime said was true. After the Anita Grand Prime fled after being injured by the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, it was extremely likely that he had been ambushed by Ta, Ji, and Yenzun. In the end, the Anita Grand Prime died, and before he died, he used an ability to project the heavenly palace of Bixing and the fortune jade of the Saints' world. He also recorded his cultivation method in the fortune jade, leaving behind his legacy so that his legacy would not be severed. This is because there are very few people who can enter the heavenly palace of Bixing in the Saints' world. If he had not done that back then, it was extremely likely that his legacy would have been severed. Jianqin sank into his thoughts. After quite a while, he deduced. If that's the case, the legacy that the Anata Grand Prime left behind should be true, and what the Anata Grand Prime, who was most likely transformed from the Tower Spirit, said was extremely likely what the Anata Grand Prime had left behind in the past. It's also true that he obtained the legacy and killed Yenzun. The only thing that can't be trusted is his comprehension of the laws of destruction. That's right. The comprehension of the laws of destruction is extremely likely to be part of the Tower Spirit's scheme. His goal is probably to possess Master. As an artifact spirit, he actually wants to possess Master. That's going against the heavens. He needs to pay an unimaginably high price, and the slightest carelessness will lead to his death. Has the Tower Spirit gone mad? Ziying scoffed as if he was mocking the Tower Spirit's naivety. So much for the Tower being so agile for countless years to actually have such thoughts. With me, Qing Sua, and Ziying present, it's impossible for it to succeed. And has the Anata Grand Prime not realized that urging Master to fuse the bead into his soul in such a hurry would only lead to Master's suspicions? Qing Sua scorned. Whether he's the artifact spirit of the Anata Tower or just a fragment of the soul of the Anata Grand Prime's disciple, Taji, we can't be certain right now. However, I do see some familiarity with the artifact spirit of the Anata Tower in the eyes of the fake Anata Grand Prime. And the Tower Spirit just happens to know the laws of destruction. I think he's probably the artifact spirit of the Anata Tower. I never thought that the artifact spirit of the Anata Tower would survive the explosion of the immortal Emperor's essence blood. Jianqin deduced and sank into his thoughts. He then thought of the black bead he had stored in a wooden box in his space ring. He continued to communicate with Ziying's sword spirit. But even if the Tower Spirit isn't dead, he must be extremely weak. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to not attack me when I condensed my body earlier. It's extremely likely that he's so weak that he can't even deal with my soul. Or in other words, he doesn't have the power to break through your defenses. If that's really the case, there's no need to worry about the Tower Spirit at all. He's even weaker than me and Ziying right now. And with the Anata Tower suppressed, it's basically impossible for the Tower Spirit to recover. Even if he does recover a certain amount of strength in the future, Master can kill him with a flick of his finger. Qing Sua snickered. She took pleasure in the Tower Spirit's miserable fate. Jianqin did not think too much about this. Even though he knew the Tower Spirit was still alive, he was unable to find where the Tower Spirit was hiding. After all, he had only refined the first floor of the tower. He could only vaguely sense the space from the second to the 9th floor. He could not grasp every corner as clearly as he could on the first floor. As for the bead, although he guessed that it was extremely likely to be possessed, Jianqin did not believe that it was where the Tower Spirit resided. My priority right now is to increase my strength. Only when I'm powerful enough will I be fearless of all threats, Jianqin thought. He looked at the fortune jade seat before him and slowly made his way over to sit down on it. Although the seat was only a projection, Jianqin actually felt like he was sitting on a piece of real fortune jade when he sat on it. Immediately, a sliver of coldness radiated from the fortune jade, spreading through his body. Not only did he feel relaxed, but even his chaotic force seemed to circulate slightly faster. At the same time, a refreshing presence invaded Jianqin's head from the fortune jade. At that moment, Jianqin entered a wondrous state. At that moment, Jianqin felt like the clouds had parted to reveal the blue sky. The hazy and profound laws of the world were now clearly laid out before him, as if he could see every single vein in the world. This fortune jade seat really is something good. Sitting on it really can help people comprehend the way of the sword. It has the same effect as the comprehension tea tree. If I can just sit here and cultivate, my comprehension of the way of the sword will definitely skyrocket, Jianqin thought. Then he sighed. It was a pity that it was not a real thing, or he could have taken it away and sat on it every day to cultivate and comprehend the way of the sword. However, at this moment, a gentle power suddenly radiated from the seat. Before the gentle power, Jianqin felt like he had become a tiny boat in the ocean. He was so insignificant, being pushed off the seat without being able to put up any resistance at all. At the same time, an obscure voice rang out in his mind. "You are not fated with me. You cannot obtain my legacy." The voice sounded like both a man and a woman, old and young, like an insect and a bird. It seemed to contain all the sounds in the world, fusing with all the sounds in the world. "This is the voice of the Anatta Grand Prime." Jianqin's face changed as he stood before the seat. He became surprised and doubtful as he carefully recalled the voice that had rang out in his soul. A while later, a gleam of light flashed through Jianqin's eyes. He sat down on the seat again. He was not interested in the Anatta Grand Prime's legacy because he cultivated the chaotic body. Even though the Anatta Grand Prime's cultivation method was heaven-defying, it was not necessarily suitable for him. What he truly wanted was to cultivate on the seat and use its wondrous characteristics to comprehend the way of the sword. However, this time was no exception. Jianqin only sat on the seat for a few seconds before the gentle power appeared again, pushing him away. "You are not fated with me. You cannot obtain my legacy." The Anatta Grand Prime's voice rang out in Jianqin's head again. It was impossible to tell if the voice was male or female, or even if the voice was young or old. It contained all the sounds in the world. It had become a law, directly reaching into the depths of his soul. "Can't I even sit on it and cultivate?" Jianqin's face became uneasy. He was unwilling to accept the fact that he was unable to enjoy the treasure before him. Even though the seat was only a projection, it would still be extremely beneficial to his comprehension of the way of the sword, just like the comprehension tea tree. At the same time, he did not have much of the comprehension tea tree left. Every single leaf gave him an extremely limited amount of time to comprehend the way of the sword. However, if he sat on the seat, there would be no time limit. He could continue to comprehend the way of the sword. Jianqin gritted his teeth. He was unwilling to give up on this opportunity. He sat on the seat for the third time, but this time he only treated it like a regular cushion. He sealed off his senses, preventing himself from comprehending the mysteries within the seat. He hoped that he would not be rejected, as the pure energy within the seat would still flow into his body as long as he sat on it. In the end, Jianqin was disappointed. He only treated the seat as a cushion, but he still lasted for less than 3 seconds before he was pushed out by the gentle energy within the seat. The sound of the way rang out in his head for the third time. This time it was as loud as a bell, causing Jianqin's soul to tremble. It was already slightly aggressive. Jianqin refused to give up. He tried everything he could to sit on the seat for the 4th time. After 3 seconds, he was pushed out by the gentle energy again. He immediately paled. The same sound rang out in his head for the 4th time. It was like a thunderclap, dealing a heavy blow to his soul. There was a tearing pain, causing his soul to be slightly injured. The further it goes, the more powerful the Tao sound will become. If I continue to use the fortune jade pedestal to cultivate, the next Tao sound will become even more terrifying. It will be enough to severely injure my soul or even directly disperse it. It looks like I have no hope of using the fortune jade pedestal. Jianqin stood nearby with a pale face as he stared at the seat, silently. He sighed inside and left in despair. Jianqin stood at the entrance of the Anatta Tower as he stared at it. He had never come to the Anatta Tower this time. He only wanted to find some treasures, or the treasures the Anatta Grand Prime had left behind in the past to increase his strength. However, he had never thought that the only thing he had gained from the Anatta Tower was defeating the artifact spirit and refining the 1st floor. He had not gained anything else apart from that. The Anatta Grand Prime had indeed left behind his treasures in the Anatta Tower, but they had all been placed in a spatial crack on the 9th floor. With Jianqin's current strength, it was impossible for him to take them out. There are a total of 9 floors in the Anatta Tower. I can only refine the 1st floor right now, so I can only gain basic control over the tower. "I can't even use its power," Jianqin murmured. His voice was filled with helplessness. He extended his hand, and the Inata tower immediately shrank at a visible rate. In the end, it shrank to the size of a finger and flew into Jianqin's hand. Chapter 1497. Jianqin said softly, "I've already confirmed that the artifact spirit hasn't died from the explosion of the immortal emperor's essence blood. Since the artifact spirit is still here, I don't have the ability to break through the seal on the Inata tower. Even if I did, I wouldn't be able to do so with my current strength. Once the seal is gone, the artifact spirit of the Inata tower will be able to rapidly recover and grow at a rate that will far surpass mine." After a moment of thought, Jianqin took out the wooden box containing the comprehension of the laws of destruction from his space ring. With a thought, he placed the wooden box in the Inata tower. He felt that it was safer to leave it in the Inata tower. If he carried it with him, he was worried that something might happen one day. He still did not understand the use of the bead. Possession was only a guess between him and the sword spirits. He did not want to try out the effects of the bead because he knew that the bead would only harm him. Trying it out would be pointless. Although I can't unleash the full power of the Inata tower right now, it's still the life-bound god artifact of the Inata Grand Prime after all. The materials used to forge it are all rare. So even if I can't unleash any of its power, just the weight of the tower is enough to smash a planet, Jianqin thought. Jianqin stared at the finger-sized tower in his hand and gradually smiled. Although he did not obtain what he wanted this time, which was rather regretful, he had obtained the Inata tower, which made the trip worthwhile. Even though the Inata tower was dead now, only possessing indestructible materials and terrifying weight, just the weight of the tower itself was not something a receival expert could endure. As Jianqin had refined the first floor of the Inata tower, he had obtained the most basic control over it. As a result, the Inata tower was as light as a feather in his hand, but once it left Jianqin's hand, it would become extremely heavy. He had no doubt that he could smash a receival expert to death with just the weight of the tower. With a thought, the Inata tower immediately vanished from Jianqin's hand. An imprint that was identical to the Inata tower appeared on Jianqin's hand. It was small and exquisite, growing on Jianqin's palm like a birthmark. Jianqin could have fused the Inata tower into his soul, but before he completely refined it, he did not plan on doing so. There were just too many hidden dangers. Jianqin glanced at the plains one last time before leaving. The path out was extremely difficult as well. Jianqin had no idea how long he had walked through the hazy mist, nor did he know how many times he had been randomly teleported away. In the end, he found the way out by coincidence and made his way out of the sea of despair where he had no sense of direction at all. The hazy mist that blocked out the senses of the soul did not disperse after the Inata tower was taken away. It continued to circulate like before. Jianqin did not remain outside the sea of despair. He immediately shot into the air, charging out of the sea realm in a single moment. With a huge splash on the surface of the sea, he had already charged into the blue sky. Afterwards, he turned into a violet streak of light and shot off into the distance. He moved extremely quickly. Blaze City, where the Flame mercenaries resided, was currently bustling with activity. The streets and alleys were filled with people, and the hubbub of voices could be heard. On the wide main road, carriages filled with goods were escorted by groups of burly mercenaries, moving in and out of Blaze City in an orderly fashion. Even though mercenaries from various places had gathered in Flame City, causing the city to be filled with all sorts of people, no fights had occurred in the city. The current Flame City was no longer as simple as a base for the Flame mercenaries. Instead, it had vaguely replaced Mercenary City, becoming the holy land of all mercenaries on the Tianyuan continent. Although Flame City could not be compared to Mercenary City in terms of heritage, this did not affect its supreme status in the hearts of the mercenaries on the Tianyuan continent. This was because the city lord was the greatest human expert, Jianqin. He was a supreme existence on the Tianyuan continent a sovereign without a doubt. The Vice City Lord of Flame City by Lien had become a renowned figure on the Tianyuan continent long ago. Even the magical beasts, the 100 races, and the 3 races of the Sea Realm had legends about her. At this moment, a violet streak of light shot through the sky above Flame City with lightning speed. It vanished in the blink of an eye, entering the city lord's estate. The violet streak of light moved just too quickly and silently. Coupled with the fact that it was daytime, only a few experts in the city sensed its arrival. Bai Hai suddenly opened his eyes in a secret room within the city lord's estate. A smear of pride appeared on his face as he murmured, "After disappearing for over a decade, my great-grandson has finally returned." In the past few years, basically the entire world has been discussing whether Class 8 Radiant Saint Masters have the ability to revive Saint weapons. I'm very curious about this secret as well. I should be able to find out the answer now. Bai Hai stood up and left the room with a smile. Brother's back. Bai Lien and Yu Yu, who were strolling in the garden, sensed Jianshan's return as soon as possible. They immediately became overjoyed. With a flash, the two of them left, hurrying over as quickly as they could. It had already been over a decade since Jianshan had last appeared. Ever since he had reached Class 8 and obtained a large pile of saint weapons from Flame City, he had completely vanished from the sight of the people of Flame City. Even during the second invasion of the world of Forsaken Saints, he had only met Tai Ta, Poseidon, and a few other Origin Realm experts. At the same time, De Gufeng, Yunzheng Sr., and Jeditai, and the others from the city Lord's Estate, as well as a few other members of the upper echelon of Flame City, stopped what they were doing and immediately headed to the discussion hall to pay their respects. Chapter 1498. Saint rulers were reclusive experts that would only appear once every 100 years, or even several hundred years. Yet today, 2 saint rulers were like guards in Flame City. They wore sturdy tungsten armor as they respectfully knelt there. They did not even dare to breathe too loudly. If this had happened in the past, it would have been enough to shock countless people. Even when the Tianyuan continent faced the threat of the world of Forsaken Saints, saint rulers still possessed extraordinary statuses, whether it was the Holy Emperor or the Holy Emperor. It was basically impossible for them to kneel so willingly. Even the Holy Emperor was unable to achieve something like this. However, Jianshan possessed enough prestige to receive the worship of saint rulers. Let alone saint rulers, even the Holy Emperor who revered the strong could not help but bend his prideful knees before Jianshan, submitting to Jianshan. This was not because they did not possess any pride, but because they revered the strong. Not to mention that Jianshan was the only person since Mo Tianyan to surpass the Holy Emperor in all these years. Yang Lai, Gui Haidao, and Feng Shaotian were not people of the Tianyuan continent. After coming to the Tianyuan continent from the Saints' world, their cultivation had fallen from the Origin Realm to the Holy Emperor. Even now, they were unable to make a full recovery. As a result, the 3 of them were only half a step away from the Origin Realm. They were not true Origin Realm experts. "You can all rise," Jianshan gently said as he looked at the 2 rows of people kneeling beside him. Mixed emotions filled his eyes. He could not help but think of the time when he had been forced to hide in Mercenary City by saint rulers. At that time, saint rulers were unreachable, supreme existences in his eyes. He did not even have the power to fight back before saint rulers. He did not even have the ability to flee. However, he had become an existence that saint rulers could worship now, which made Jianshan sigh in amazement. "Greetings," the 2 guards kneeling on the 2 sides said together. Their voices were filled with respect before slowly standing up. They stood to one side quietly, not even daring to breathe too loudly. The 2 saint rulers glanced at Jianshan from time to time. Their faces were filled with fanaticism. The 2 of them were not originally part of the Flame Mercenaries. They had only joined over a decade ago out of respect for Jianshan. Afterwards, they became the guards of the discussion hall of the city lord's estate. To them, being able to serve as guards of the discussion hall was a great honor. They took pride in the sacred duty. This was because the discussion hall was the place that decided the fate of the entire Flame mercenaries. It was a sacred hall that could influence the entire Tianyuan continent. This was because all the important meetings of the Flame mercenaries were held in the discussion hall, and all the information came from there. In particular, when they saw Jianqin, every single one of the guards became so excited that they could not control themselves. They had already heard of Jianqin's name. They had only seen Jianqin's statue in the past, but they had never seen him in person. Today, not only had they seen Jianqin in person, but they had even come into contact with him at such a close distance. This made them extremely excited. Ha 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 ha, great-grandson, you've been missing for over a decade. If you still hadn't returned, those two girls would have sent people to the entire continent to look for you. A burst of hearty laughter rang out. Bai Hai, dressed in a white robe, walked in with his hands behind his back. He seemed to be strolling leisurely, but every step he took covered a distance of several hundred meters. In just a few steps, he entered the conference hall from afar. Brother, you've finally returned. Jianqin. As soon as Bai Hai entered the discussion hall, Bai Lian and Yu's joyful voices rang out. With a flash, the two of them charged in as quickly as they could. They were excited. Afterward, Yun Zhang Sr. and Wang Yifeng, De Gufeng, Jeditai, and the upper echelon of the Flame mercenaries hurried over as well. When they saw Jianqin, they all clasped their hands at Jianqin before standing to one side quietly. Jianqin smiled as he looked at these people. His smile was filled with gentleness. Great-grandson, how has the revival of the Saint weapon been going? Basically, the entire world has been discussing this topic over the past decade. There have even been quite a few old people who have come to understand the situation, but they've all returned in disappointment. Even I am extremely curious about this matter. I wonder if the Saint weapon really can be revived, like the legends say. I'm your great-grandfather after all. So even if you want to hide it from the entire world, you should at least tell your great-grandfather a little and satisfy his curiosity. Bai Hai chuckled. As Jianqin Sr., he obviously did not need to be as polite to Jianqin as the others. He did not need to hold back when he spoke either. Brother, where have you been over the past decade? You've made big sister Yu, and I worry to death, Bai Lian grumbled as she shook Jianqin's arm. She was filled with blame and dissatisfaction. Yu stood to one side and stared at Jianqin silently. She smiled and her gaze was gentle. Tears seemed to glimmer in her eyes. Although over a decade had passed, even the weakest person present, Bai Lian, was a saint ruler. She possessed a lifespan of several thousand years, so a mere decade was not enough to leave a mark on them. Everyone was the same as before. Even Bai Lian and Yu were the same. Other than becoming more mature and steady, they had not changed much. Afterward, Jianqin chatted with everyone for a while before telling them about the secret behind the revival of the Saint weapon. He could sense that the third battle against the world of Forsaken Saints was not far away, so there was no need to keep it a secret. Letting everyone know the result would only increase their confidence. Everyone in the discussion hall fell silent after learning about the drawbacks of the revival of the Saint weapon. Even Bai Hai frowned and remained silent for quite some time. On the Tianyuan continent, many people would leave behind their saint weapons when they reached the end of their lifespans. Other than those who did it for their clans, even more people held onto a sliver of hope that they could be revived. Even though this hope was extremely slim, many people would still leave behind their saint weapons without any hesitation to gamble on a second life. However, no one had thought that the saint weapon would become a puppet without a will of its own after being revived. They would be controlled by the person who revived them. If they had known that this would happen, just how many people would be willing to leave behind their saint weapons when they were about to reach the end of their lifespans and become a puppet under the control of someone else? Some experts who had reached the 9th heavenly layer did not have to leave behind their saint weapons when they were about to reach the end of their lifespans. They could also destroy their saint weapons at the last moment. After all, not everyone had a clan. There were many independent cultivators as well. Chapter 1499. If we can't survive the calamity of the world of forsaken saints, we won't have a future. In my opinion, it's not necessarily a bad thing for saint weapons to be reduced to puppets under the current circumstances, although their strength will decrease. They'll possess an advantage that we can't possess, which is the lack of pain and fear. Even when they face death, they'll feel nothing. Puppets like these that exist like sacrificial warriors can be unimaginably useful at certain times. And in recent years, seniors Yang Lai, Feng Xiaotian, and Gui Haidao have been teaching formations to all the Holy Emperor of the four races. If these formations are used by the Holy Emperor, they can trap Origin realm experts. There are even some powerful formations that can temporarily grant them strength that far exceeds their own after paying a certain price, allowing them to unleash extremely powerful attacks. If these formations are used by the Holy Emperor puppets, it'll be perfect. The person who spoke was Dugafeng. His face was emotionless and his voice was rather cold. It was as if his resolute face would never smile. Bai Hai's eyes immediately lit up when he heard Dugafeng's words. He said, "That's right. If the Holy Emperor ignites all of their life force to cast the formations, they won't be able to surpass the Holy Emperor in strength. But a few powerful existences can reach the peak of the Holy Emperor. Since these puppets have no consciousness, continuing to exist might be an insult to them who were renowned when they were alive. Just let them shine one last time in the next battle against the world of forsaken saints. They'll protect their homeland with our generation." Jianqin nodded silently. He sank into his thoughts. He knew long ago that Yang Lai, Gui Haidao, and Feng Xiaotian were teaching the Holy Emperor some formations from the Saints' world to the Holy Emperor of the four races, and they were personally guiding the Holy Emperor through the various formations. Jianqin knew a few of the formations from the higher world. They were all sword formations he had obtained from the sword spirits. Even though the sword spirits had only taught Jianqin the weakest sword formations, they were still much more powerful than the formations Feng Xiaotian and the others had taught him. Using the sword formations required extremely great strength as well. Even with Jianqin's current strength, he was still unable to use them. Not only was his current strength lacking, but the sword formations were just too profound. He needed a certain amount of time to comprehend them. Looks like I should go see great-grandfather Yang Lai and obtain the formations from him so that I can get the Holy Emperor puppets to use them, Jianqin thought. Afterwards, he dismissed everyone in the discussion hall. Only Bai Hai, Bai Lian Yuyu, and Gudafeng remained. Afterward, he took out the artifact space and let out Bai Yuntian, who had been cultivating inside. Bai Yuntian had been cultivating Radiant Saint Force in the artifact space for over a decade. Her rate of improvement had been extremely rapid. Although she was nowhere near as fast as Jianqin, she was definitely a rare sight on the Tianyuan continent. Now, she had reached the peak of Class 6 and was preparing to reach Class 7. Jianqin did not see newbies Mingdong or Little Fatty in the discussion hall, but he did not ask about them. He directly expanded the senses of his soul, enveloping the entire city in a single moment. He even reached the secret room, hidden deep underground. After failing to find the three of them, Jianqin continued to expand the senses of his soul without any hesitation. It enveloped the entire Tianyuan continent and even extended to the vast sea beyond the Tianyuan continent. Wild winds whistled in the sea beyond the Tianyuan continent. Waves surged on the surface of the sea, kicking up waves that were several dozen meters tall from time to time. At this moment, a huge sea beast moved through the waves. It moved extremely steadily, and no matter how violent the waves were, they were unable to make the sea beast sway at all. A young man in golden robes who seemed to be in his 20s reclined on the back of the huge sea beast. He held a jug of alcohol in his hand, and he would occasionally take a sip. He seemed satisfied. Beside the young man in golden robes were two burly women who seemed to be in their 20s. They knelt beside the young man in golden robes, carefully massaging his legs and back with reverence and fear. The two women's appearances were extremely ordinary. Even though they were very fearful before the golden-robed young man, they were unable to hide their valiance. Their powerful presences that belonged to saint rulers leaked out from them. The two women were clearly Class 7 magical beasts of the magical beast clan. Now, these days are truly happy. I can go wherever I want, unlike before when I didn't dare to go to human territory and had to hide myself all the time, avoiding that old snake on the beast god continent. My life was on the line all the time. Afterwards, when I went to the sea realm with Genshin, my life was on the line many times. I almost couldn't see the sun again, the young man murmured to himself. He drank a mouthful of alcohol as he mumbled to himself. Reminiscence filled his eyes, as well as some nostalgia. This person was none other than the golden-striped silver snake Nubes. But I must say that my days with Genshin have indeed been much more interesting than before. In just a few short decades, the great Nubes, have gone from Class 7 to Class 9. This is all because the great Nubes, have made an extremely wise decision back then. If I had continued to hide in the dwelling and cultivate like before, I probably wouldn't have reached Class 8, Nubes said proudly. Afterward, he glanced at the two women kneeling beside him and sniggered. Do you know who the great Nubes, Genshin, is? We do, of course we do. The two of us have heard of Sovereign Genshin's name and feel great admiration for him. It's just that we've never personally seen Sovereign Genshin. So we've always felt regret, the two burly women replied in a hurry as deep admiration filled their eyes. Since you've become my servants, the great Nubes, will naturally fulfill your tiny wish. In the future, I'll obviously give you a chance to personally see my brother. Nubes revealed a sliver of pride. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a voice seemed to ring out from nowhere, directly ringing out in Nubes' head. Nubes, return to Flame City immediately. Nubes was stunned. In the next moment, his eyes lit up. Without any hesitation, he immediately ripped open a space gate and left. You two return to the island first and wait. Nubes' voice only rang out slowly the moment he stepped through the space gate. Flame City. Not only did Genshin find Nubes, who was still overseas through the senses of his soul, but he also discovered where Mingdong and Little Fatty were. His heart immediately sank. Chapter 1500. Genshin saw everything in Longevity Valley clearly with the senses of his soul. The heavy atmosphere of sorrow that permeated the valley made Genshin fall silent. At that moment, Genshin could not help but feel a pang of pain in his heart. Some sorrow appeared on his face as well. Genshin stood silently in the discussion hall. Although he was currently in Flame City, his heart had already flown to Longevity Valley 1,000,000 kilometers away. In the end, he let out a sigh. Outside Flame City, space suddenly twisted violently. It ripped open and a colorful space gate appeared. The golden-robed Nubes walked out leisurely. With a flash, he vanished as if he had teleported. 2 seconds later, Nubes appeared in the city, Lord's estate. He swaggered into the majestic discussion hall in the center of the estate. The guards along the way all bowed respectfully. Genshin, you finally returned after disappearing for over a decade. Sigh. The great Nubes, have already gotten used to being with you. I really haven't gotten used to the time you've been gone for over a decade, the great Nubes sighed. Nubes laughed aloud as soon as he entered the discussion hall. Genshin's return made him happy from the bottom of his heart. This was because it was just as he had said. The years he spent with Genshin had been the most exciting period of his life. Along the way, there had always been shocking matters. Now that his days had suddenly become peaceful, Nubes found it rather difficult to get used to the way he used to when he had already fallen in love with his old life. With Nubes' return, Genshin suppressed his pain and returned to normal very soon. He glanced past the people who were still in the discussion hall and said, I've called you all here this time because I want to see if any of you have the fortune to obtain a great fortuitous encounter. Don't resist. I'll take you to another world." With that, the Inata tower, which was only the size of a finger, appeared in Jian Chen's hand. It rapidly expanded under Jian Chen's control, becoming a tower over 10 meters tall in the blink of an eye. Fortunately, the discussion hall was over 20 meters tall, so there was no need to worry about the top of the tower piercing through the roof. Jian Chen had not completely refined the Inata tower. As a result, he was unable to control many of the tower's abilities. He obviously could not make the Inata tower hover in the air by itself after it had lost its artifact spirit. As a result, he could only place the tower on the ground. Bang! As soon as the damaged Inata tower landed on the ground, it produced a heavy thud. The ground shook violently, and not only did the tremors affect Flame City, but the shock waves rapidly expanded in all directions. In the end, they reached several 100,000 kilometers away, causing a great earthquake that had not happened in the past century to occur across a small portion of the Tianyuan continent. The discussion hall of Flame City became covered in cracks in a single moment. Even though a sliver of Xiao Jin's energy had been fused into the discussion hall, making it extremely tough where even the Holy Emperor would not be able to destroy it, it was as fragile as tofu before the tremors from the Inata Tower. When the Inata Tower landed on the ground, it did not just cause a rumble and an earthquake. The ground where the Inata Tower stood rapidly sank. The Inata Tower, which was over 10 meters tall, sank into the ground as well. The Inata Tower used its own weight to crush the ground, so it sank extremely quickly. In just a few seconds, the entire Inata Tower had basically sunk into the ground. Only a third of its tip remained above the ground. Jian Chen immediately slapped his head when he saw this. He had forgotten that the Inata Tower could not leave his hand. If he held it, the Inata Tower would be as light as a feather, but once it left his hand, the Inata Tower's weight would be completely unleashed. Even if he did not use any of the Inata Tower's power, he would be able to pierce through a star with just its weight. Without any hesitation, Jian arrived at the tip of the Inata Tower that was about to disappear into the horizon in a flash. He gently pressed his hand against the top of the tower. The moment Jian pressed his hand against the Inata Tower, the tower immediately stopped sinking. It then rapidly shrank, and in just a few seconds, the Inata Tower had shrunk to the size of a finger. Jian held it in his hand, leaving behind a pit over a dozen meters deep. "Brother, look at you. You've destroyed the discussion hall. What kind of treasure is this?" Bai Lian grumbled as she stared at Jian hand that held the Inata Tower. Her eyes were filled with great curiosity. Jian bitterly smiled as he looked at the ruined discussion hall. He said, "This treasure is far too heavy. We can't fit it here. Looks like we need to find another place." Afterwards, Jian left Flame City with the others in search of a sturdy place to place the Inata Tower. Naturally, the people of Flame City would deal with the damaged discussion hall. Jian ignored the earthquake that affected a small portion of the Tianyuan continent. There was a mountain range near Flame City. The mountain range was originally rich in tungsten alloy and had once attracted the attention of the entire Tianyuan continent. However, as the metallic spirit in the mine matured and turned into Xiao Jin and left, the tungsten alloy mine completely lost its original value. It was reduced to a mountain range that could not be any more ordinary. Not a single bit of tungsten alloy could be found there. There was a deep gorge in the depths of the mountain range. Very few people knew that even though the mountain range had been reduced to an ordinary mountain range, the ground at the bottom of the gorge was not as loose as other places. Instead, it was extremely tough. At this moment, Jian, Bai Yuntian, Bai Hai, Bai Lian, Yu, Dugafeng, and newbies all stood at the bottom of the gorge. Before them was a 3,000-meter tall tower. The tower was covered in sword slashes, and each slash flickered with light as they radiated with threatening sword chi. Above the ancient pagoda, there was a huge barrier that covered the entire mountain range and concealed the existence of the ancient pagoda. Chapter 1501. Before the Anatat Tower, newbies by Hai, Dugafong, Yu by Lien, and so on were all stern. The Anatat Tower before them was heavily damaged. Even the main entrance had been destroyed, making it seem like an abandoned tower, but they still felt an invisible pressure from it. The pressure was so great that it made them feel like they were tiny ants before the boundless sky. They were the tiny ants, and the broken ancient pagoda was the boundless sky. Jianqin, where did you find this treasure? It's clearly damaged, but when I stand before it, I actually feel insignificant from the depths of my soul. And just a single glance at the sword slashes on the tower is enough to make me, the great Jianqin, shiver. I'm a mighty Class 9 magical beast, equivalent to the Holy Emperor of humans. I'm one of the existences that stand at the apex of the world. Yet a single glance is enough to make a Holy Emperor shiver. I, the great newbies, am unable to imagine just how extraordinary this tower is. Newbies said as he glanced past the sword slashes on the tower from time to time. He was extremely stern. Jianqin raised his head and looked at the Anatat Tower. He smiled and said, "This tower is indeed extraordinary. Let's go. I'll take you in. There's a great, fortuitous encounter inside. Whether you can obtain it will be up to fate." Jianqin did not explain too much about the Anatat Tower. He did not even tell them its name. It was not because he did not trust them, but because the Anatat Tower was connected to the Anatat Grand Prime's legacy. If the Anatat Tower was leaked in the Saints' world in the future, it would lead to disaster for them. Even though not everyone could obtain the Anatat Grand Prime's legacy, just the Anatat Tower was enough to create a storm of blood in the Saints' world. After all, the Anatat Tower was the famed treasure of the Anatat Grand Prime of the Saints' world. Jianqin believed that the Anatat Tower was no weaker than the Azulite swords when they were at their peak. Even peak Grand Primes would come to fight over such a powerful god artifact. Afterwards, Jianqin took everyone to the 9th floor of the Anatat Tower. When newbies and the others saw the majestic projection of the heavenly palace of Bishing, they were all stunned. Not only was the heavenly palace of Bishing much larger than any divine hall they had ever seen, but they could also sense an indescribable feeling from it. This was the feeling of the power of laws. The projection of the heavenly palace of Bishing had also fused with laws. This divine hall is clearly illusionary, but when I walk on it, it's no different from walking on solid ground. It feels exactly the same. This is definitely not an ability possessed by the Holy Emperor. Only existences that have surpassed the Holy Emperor can achieve something like this. By Hai sighed in amazement. He carefully studied the heavenly palace of Bishing and immediately became shocked. This was because he discovered that even if he used his full strength as the Holy Emperor, he would not necessarily be able to destroy the illusionary palace. That was not all. Even the space within the damaged tower was countless times tougher than on the Tianyuan continent. Even if peak experts like the Holy Emperor used their full strength, they would not be able to cause the space there to ripple at all. This tower is not simple at all. It must have been created by a peak origin realm expert, at the very least. And looking at how realistic the projection is, even peak origin realm experts probably wouldn't have the ability to create something like this. It's extremely likely that it's a treasure used by godhood experts. Bai Hai was shocked, but he was also very curious. He wondered where Jianqin had found such a powerful tower. Everyone moved through the illusionary, heavenly palace of Bishing. Along the way, Bai Hai and the others who had come here for the first time looked around curiously. Although the heavenly palace of Bishing was illusionary, allowing them to see the inside of the palace from the outside, they could only see a small portion of it. Most of the palace was hazy, as if it was shrouded by mist. It was impossible to see clearly, but that did not stop their curiosity at all. In the end, Jianqin brought them to the fortune jade seat. He pointed at the disc-sized fortune jade and said to them, "The great fortune I'm talking about is on these seats. Take turns sitting on them. It'll be up to your luck to see if you can obtain the great fortune." Everyone was looking at the white jade platform, which was only the size of a millstone. They were all very confused. Finally, Bai Lian couldn't help but ask, "Brother, what kind of creation is this? Why is it so mysterious?" Jianqin immediately became stern. He said sternly, "Don't ask. Don't know too much about this place. Although I know you won't divulge it. I'm just afraid that in the future there will be experts who will use various abilities to learn about this place from you. That will be a disaster for all of us." Everyone was shocked when they heard that. They all looked at Jianqin in disbelief and shock. They had all been stunned by Jianqin's words. However, they all understood that this place was extraordinary from Jianqin's words. After a discussion, they decided to let Bai Yuntian sit on the seat first, because she was the only one who had the right to do so out of everyone present. Bai Yuntian tried her best to avoid it, but in the end, she had no choice but to follow everyone's decision. She became the first person to sit on the fortune jade seat. The moment Bai Yuntian sat on the stone seat, Jianqin stared at her. He felt rather nervous. He felt very conflicted inside. He hoped that Bai Yuntian could obtain the Anata Grand Prime's legacy, but at the same time he did not want her to obtain it. This was because he understood that once Bai Yuntian obtained the legacy, she would embark on a completely different path. She would definitely experience many killings and dangers along the way. As a result, Bai Yuntian would no longer be able to live as peacefully as before. He hoped that Bai Yuntian could become powerful so that she could live a long life. Even if she encountered some danger, she would be able to protect herself. At the same time, he hoped that Bai Yuntian would be able to live a carefree life. He did not want Bai Yuntian to become involved in too much killing. Chapter 1502. Under Jianqin's nervous gaze, he finally sensed the familiar and tremendous power surge out of the seat again after a few seconds. It pushed Bai Yuntian off the seat. Jianqin obviously knew that Bai Yuntian was not fated to be with the Anata Grand Prime after experiencing this several times. She was unable to obtain the Anata Grand Prime's legacy, which relieved him slightly as well as made him feel slightly disappointed. Bai Yuntian opened her eyes after being pushed off the seat. She immediately looked around cautiously, but when she discovered that there was no one else in the surroundings aside from Jianqin and the others, she became surprised and doubtful. "Xiang'er, I think I heard someone talking earlier," Bai Yuntian asked Jianqin. Jianqin smiled and said, "Mother, that was the voice of a supreme senior from many years ago. In reality, this senior has already been dead for many years, but before he died, he left his legacy in the fortune jade seat. Only those who are fated can obtain it." Bai Yuntian nodded in understanding. She then said to Bai Hai, "Great-grandfather, you should go try as well. See if you can obtain this senior's legacy." Bai Hai chuckled aloud. He glanced at Bai Yuntian, Bai Lian, and Jianqin gently. His eyes were filled with the affection of a senior for his juniors. He said, "How can I, as a senior, walk before you juniors when there's an opportunity to obtain the legacy of a supreme senior right before us? Great-grandson Jianqin's talent is outstanding, and his cultivation speed is astonishing. He has even become the greatest human expert now, so I think he probably doesn't care about this legacy at all. Lian, come, go first. Let's see if you're fated to be with this supreme senior. Great-grandfather, Sister Yu is brother's fiancée, so she should go first. If Yu doesn't try, how can it be my turn?" Bai Lian pouted and said rather unhappily. Yu stood there gracefully in her white dress. She smiled faintly, making her seem noble and elegant. She said gently, "Sister Bai Lian, Yu cultivates Fairy Haoyue's cultivation method. Although it might not be as powerful as the Supreme Senior, it's still quite extraordinary. Only your cultivation method is rather ordinary, so you should go first." Bai Lian hesitated. In her heart, she hoped that Yu could obtain this Supreme Senior's cultivation method. This was not only because of how close she was with Yu, but more importantly, Yu was her brother's fiancé. Since her brother was the one who found the legacy, Yu naturally had to be ranked before her. Seeing how Bai Lian was still hesitating, Jianqin said, "Lianer, go try. This Supreme Senior's legacy isn't that easy to obtain. It doesn't matter who goes first, because it's very likely that no one here will be able to obtain it." "All right, since you've asked, I'll sit on it." Bai Lian smiled sweetly and sat down cross-legged on the fortune divine jade pedestal. A few seconds later, the powerful and gentle force appeared once again, pushing Bai Lian off the platform. Bai Lian opened her eyes and said rather helplessly, "Brother, I'm not fated to meet this senior either. But is this senior a human or a beast or man or a woman? Why do I feel like this senior's voice is strange? It sounds like everything." "That's the voice of the way. It contains everything in the world. So it's whatever you think it is," Jianqin explained with a smile. He looked at Bai Lian with some concern. Afterwards, Bai Hai, Dugafeng, and newbies all sat on the jade platform, but the outcome was the same as before. None of them had the right to obtain the Anita Grand Prime's legacy. In the end, Jianqin also let Yu try, but she was still unable to obtain the Anita Grand Prime's recognition. Even though this was something that Jianqin had expected, he still could not help but sigh when the truth was right before him. Reaching the 80th layer of comprehension of laws is enough to become a peak Grand Prime, while the Aneta Grand Prime has already comprehended the laws of fire, creation, and destruction to the limit of 100. The Sword Spirits once said that the Aneta Grand Prime was so powerful that she could rank within the top 3 in the Saints' world. Only the greatest expert in the Saints' world, the Grand Prime of the Warring Gods, who was even more powerful than the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, could surpass the Anita Grand Prime. It's obviously not easy to obtain the legacy of such a stunning expert. Perhaps only by meeting certain conditions can one obtain the Anita Grand Prime's legacy, Jianqin thought before leaving the Anita Tower with everyone. Outside the Anita Tower, Jianqin pressed his hand against the huge Anita Tower and controlled it to shrink back to the size of a finger before disappearing into his hand. Afterward, he looked at everyone and said, "You can go back first. I need to go to Longevity Valley immediately. Xiao Fatty's father has passed away. Jianqin, let me go with you." Yu looked at Jianqin gently and said softly. Jianqin nodded. He did not turn her down. He had always felt like he owed Yu. In the imperial family of the Kingdom of Jessen, many princes and princesses from the same generation as Yu had already gotten married and had children many years ago. Some of them even had grandchildren. Only Yu remained unmarried. Newbies opened his mouth. Originally, he wanted to go to Longevity Valley with Jianqin, but when he heard Yu's words, he immediately dismissed that thought. He chuckled. "Jianqin, the great newbies, I'm going to play with the 2 maidservants I just took in. I'll be going first." With that, newbies left. Afterwards, Bai Lian, Dugafeng, and Bai Hai returned to Flame City after bidding farewell to Jianqin. Bai Yuntian returned to the artifact space to continue cultivating. In the blink of an eye, only Jianqin and Yu remained at the bottom of the cliff. "Let's go as well." "All right." A streak of violet light shot into the sky from the bottom of the cliff. It shot through the air with lightning speed before vanishing into the horizon. It moved extremely quickly. Within the dazzling violet light was a huge violet sword that was 20 meters long. At this moment, Jianqin gently hugged Yu's slender breasts to keep Yu on the Ziying sword so that she would not fall. The Ziying sword moved extremely quickly. The surroundings were a blur, impossible to see clearly with the naked eye. Even though she could see the scenery along the way clearly, Yu had no interest in appreciating it at all. She closed her eyes with a blissful smile on her face as she leaned her head against Jianqin's chest. Chapter 1503. Jianqin hugged Yu gently as he sniffed the faint fragrance coming from Yu. He said softly, It's been hard on you these past few years. I've made you wait for me for so long. Do you blame me?" Yu raised her head and looked at Jianqin affectionately with her limpid eyes. Her gaze was filled with gentleness as she said softly, Jianqin, I've never blamed you, because I know that you've been through a lot these past few years. Or rather, ever since you left Kargath Academy, you've been through a lot. For you to have your current achievements, you must have sacrificed a lot these past few years, even almost sacrificing your own life. As your fiancé, I can only watch as you work hard outside without being able to help you at all. What do I have to complain about? Jianqin, do you know? Actually, in Er's heart, I've always been proud to be your wife, even though I'm still your fiancé. You're extremely outstanding, extremely powerful. You possess an unprecedented cultivation talent. Who knows how many peerless beauties have fallen for you in this world? Is very glad that Imperial Father arranged this marriage for the two of us. You looked at Jianqin in a daze. Not only was her voice pleasant, it was also extremely gentle. Afterwards, she stood on the Ziying sword and gently turned around. She hugged Jianqin tightly with her arms, pressing her entire body into Jianqin's embrace. She said, Jianqin, you once promised that you would marry you. Do you still remember? Have you ever forgotten? Of course I remember. How could I forget something like that? Only you, apart from you, I, Jianqin, have other women. Jianqin said softly. He seemed to have thought of something as a complicated expression appeared on his face. You smiled faintly and said, Jianqin, your father has 4 wives. Do you know how many consorts my father has? Jianqin shook his head. Although he was a citizen of the Kingdom of Jessin and was also the imperial protector of the Kingdom of Jessin, he knew nothing about the Kingdom of Jessin's imperial family. He did not even know how many princesses and princes the king of the Kingdom of Jessin had. Yu laughed when she saw the blank expression on Jianqin's face. She said, coquettishly, You are the imperial protector, but you don't even know this. Let me tell you, my father has 28 consorts in total. My mother is only one of them. Yu's expression darkened when she mentioned her mother. Her mother had passed away when she was just born. If it were not for the portrait, Yu probably would not even know what her mother looked like. Which of those powerful men doesn't have multiple wives? Your father is like that, and so is my father. You, on the other hand, are more outstanding than your father and my father. Who knows how many women in the world have fallen in love with you? You has long understood that you are not someone that any woman can monopolize. Therefore, does not care how many women you have. You continued speaking in a very gentle and considerate tone. What if I tell you that I already have a child? Jianqin said with some guilt. Even his parents did not know about Shangguan Aojin. The first person he told was Yu. Yu gently trembled. She stared at Jianqin in some surprise. After a moment of silence, she said with a trembling voice, Jianqin, is that true? It's true. I haven't seen him in over a decade now. He should have grown up by now, Jianqin sighed softly. He could not help but think of Shangguan Aojin on 3 Saint Island. He also felt rather guilty because he knew that he was not a good father. He had spent very little time with Shangguan Aojin in the past few years. He could even count the number of times he had spent with Shangguan Aojin. Once this is over, I'll go to 3 Saint Island and stay there until the day the world of Forsaken Saints invades, Jianqin thought. However, before that, he had to pay a visit to the Huang family because Huang Wan was there. Although I don't know who that person is, I believe that she's no ordinary woman. Jianqin, if there's an opportunity in the future, can you take me to see your child? Yu asked. Her gentle voice was very calm and composed, but Jianqin could still sense the faint disappointment in Yu's voice. Jianqin nodded. The two of them remained silent for the rest of the journey. Even though Longevity Valley was 1,000,000 kilometers away from Flame City, they crossed the distance very quickly with the speed of the Ziying sword. Longevity Valley was located at the edge of the Cross Mountain Range. Jianqin stopped at the entrance of the valley on the Ziying sword before walking in with Yu. Many years had passed, but Longevity Valley remained the same as before. It did not seem to have changed at all. Even when weeds grew, they would be cut down by the villagers as soon as possible. In the past, the atmosphere in Longevity Valley was peaceful, giving people the feeling that it was a paradise. However, the valley was covered in white cloth today. Basically, every household hung a snow-white cloth in front of their house, according to the local customs. There was also a white flower that gave off a faint, bitter smell. The entire valley was filled with sorrow. Jian Chen and you entered the village of Longevity Valley. They found the sorrowful little fatty in mourning clothes in the center of the village. He knelt before a coffin as he remained motionless like a statue. Beside him, his mother sat on the ground with swollen eyes. Her face was filled with deep sorrow. She seemed to have lost her soul, as if she had already lost it. Jianchen stared at the coffin with some sorrow. His mood became even heavier after entering Longevity Valley. He knew that the person lying in the coffin was Uncle Xiaomi, who had once saved his life. Xiaomi was born with an incomplete soul, which was why he could not break through to Saint Ruler. He only had a lifespan of 1,000 years. Now, Uncle Xiaomi had reached the end of his lifespan. He had died from exhaustion. Even 10,000-year-old, 100,000-year-old, or million-year-old heavenly resources could not change his fate. These 100,000-year-old and million-year-old heavenly resources could change a person completely. They could turn a cripple who could not cultivate saint force into a prodigy in a short amount of time. They could even bring the dead back to life. As long as the person still had a single breath left in them, they could be revived in the shortest amount of time. However, no matter how heaven-defying these heavenly resources were, they could not give a person another soul. Even Jianchen had not come across heavenly resources that could give a person another soul in the Xianhuang microcosm. Quite a few villagers in the surroundings recognized Jianchen. They all nodded and greeted Jianchen. On the day of Uncle Xiaomi's death, all the villagers in Longevity Valley felt very sad. No one was willing to say too much, only expressing their greetings with their gazes or nods. Jianchen passed through the crowd and directly arrived before Uncle Xiaomi's coffin. He stared at the coffin silently for quite a while before bowing deeply. Jianchen's heart was filled with indescribable bitterness. He was a Class 9, Radiant Saint Master. Not only could he revive saint weapons, but he could also bring people back to life. As long as the soul was not destroyed and the soul did not disperse, Jianchen could even revive the dead Holy Emperor. However, there was nothing Jianchen could do about Uncle Xiaomi's death. Chapter 1504. Longevity Valley was especially lively today, but it was not a hubbub of people or laughter. Instead, it was the most crowded day in the past several hundred years, or even over 1,000 years. Not only did all the villagers come to send off Uncle Xiaomi, but there were also many outsiders who did not belong to Longevity Valley, other than Jianchen and Jianchen. There were also the instance dungeon masters of the Blood Sword sect, the Four Protectors, and the various elders. The strongest instance dungeon master, Jiang Wang, had become the Holy Emperor with Jianchen's assistance over a decade ago. The weakest of the others were saint rulers and holy emperors. The people of the Blood Sword sect still wore red robes, as if they had been dyed red with blood. They did their best to conceal their vile presence, making themselves seem more ordinary as they arrived in Longevity Valley with an extremely low profile. After bowing to Jianchen politely, they stood behind Jianchen quietly. All of them stared at Uncle Xiaomi's coffin with mixed feelings. There was sorrow, pity, gentle sighs, and some helplessness. Before, Jianchen had become the sect master of the Blood Sword sect. The position had always been held by Houston. Ever since Houston had secluded himself in Longevity Valley 1,000 years ago and stopped participating in the conflicts of the Tianyuan continent, Xiaomi had taken over the management of the Blood Sword sect. He had even passed on secret orders for Houston from time to time. As a result, although Xiaomi was not very powerful, only a Heaven Saint Master, His status in the sect was rather special. As a result, basically all the upper echelon of the Blood Sword sect had come out now that Uncle Shiomi had passed away. They had all come to send him off. Now, the only person missing from Longevity Valley was Shiomi's father, Houston. Houston had vanished from the Tianyuan continent many years ago. Even when Shiomi passed away today, Houston was nowhere to be seen. Jianchen had also searched the entire world with the senses of his soul. Not only had he searched every inch of the continent, but he had also searched through the territories of the other 3 races. However, he still failed to find Houston. Mingdong returned from the forest in the distance. Behind him was a black bear the size of a small mountain. Right now he seemed extremely simple, just like an ordinary person. He did not have the demeanor of a supreme expert at all. His white clothes were stained with specks of dust, as well as specks of green from the grass in the forest. Mingdong dragged the huge black bear into the village. The bear's huge body rubbed against the ground, leaving behind a long trail. Soon after, Mingdong dismembered the bear and removed its monster core. He cut the bear's meat into large pieces and gave them to the villagers in charge of cooking in Longevity Valley. Most of the villagers in Longevity Valley were ordinary people. They ate 3 meals a day. In the past, there would be some villagers who cultivated Saint Force and possessed a certain level of strength who would go out to hunt, providing the village with meat. Ever since Mingdong had arrived with Little Fatty, he had been in charge of all the hunting. He had been in charge of all the meat the villagers needed. After dealing with the black bear, Mingdong arrived before Jianchen and said, "Jianchen, Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters have the ability to bring people back from the dead. You've already surpassed Class 7, so do you have a way to revive Uncle Shiomi?" Jianchen shook his head, powerlessly. He stared at Uncle Shiomi's coffin silently and sighed gently. "Uncle Shiomi's soul is incomplete. This is an innate deficiency. Anything related to the soul is the most complicated. Although I've become a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master now, I still don't have the ability to make Uncle Shiomi regrow a soul. At the same time, although Radiant Saint Masters can bring people back from the dead, there's a condition. Only when the soul is complete or when the soul of the dead is not completely destroyed can they be revived. If the soul of the dead is completely destroyed, they won't be able to be revived even if they're only a saint ruler." Mingdong's sliver of hope shattered after hearing Jianchen's explanation. Although he was not particularly familiar with Shiomi, Shiomi was Xiao Tianyu's father after all. Mingdong did not feel good when he saw Xiao Tianyu in such grief. "Jianchen, can you find my grandfather?" Xiao Tianyu finally spoke. He looked at Jianchen with some hope in his eyes as undisguised grief filled his face. On the important day of Shiomi's death, Houston could not be absent. Not only did Little Fatty hope that Houston could return, but all the villagers in Longevity Valley also hoped that the village chief could return. Jianchen shook his head once again. He had no idea whether Uncle Shio had gone to some secret place to cultivate or whether his presence had been concealed by Amagami. He searched through all the continents of the 4 races with the senses of his returnant soul, but he failed to find any traces of Uncle Shio even in a few uninhabited regions and danger zones of the Tianyuan continent. Jianchen did not even miss the Death Nest. However, he only found Lankiros and Kaiser hiding there, the 2 former rulers of the Beast God continent. But the Death Nest is rather strange. All the vengeful spirits there seem to have vanished. Is this the handiwork of Lankiros and Kaiser? But with their Holy Emperor's strength, they really do have the ability to do something like that, thought Jianchen. However, he did not pay too much attention to it. What truly caught his attention in the Death Nest was the blood-red skeleton he had seen before. The blood-red skeleton did not escape the senses of Jianchen's soul. It sat in the very depths of the Death Nest silently as a dense, red mist enveloped it. It seemed to have fallen asleep. When they fought for the saint's fruit, Jianqin felt that the blood-red skeleton was undefeatable. It had already surpassed the Holy Emperor's strength and was unfathomable. Now, Jianqin discovered that the skeleton's strength was only at late receival. It was on par with Kumu, whom he had slain in the tunnel. According to local customs, Uncle Xiao Mi's funeral lasted for 7 days. During those 7 days, no one saw Uncle Xiao Mi return. In the end, Uncle Xiao Mi was buried on a small hill near Longevity Valley. Beside Uncle Xiao Mi's tombstone was an ancient tomb that had existed for 1,000 years. It belonged to Uncle Xiao Mi's wife, Xiao Mi's mother. Uncle Xiao Mi's burial place was chosen to be next to his mother, whom he had never seen before. After the funeral, the people of the Blood Sword sect bid farewell to Jianqin. They left Longevity Valley under the lead of Jiang Wang, while Jianqin and Mingdong remained. They did not choose to leave immediately. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed since Uncle Xiao Mi's burial. During those 3 days, the pain in Xiao Tianyu's heart gradually faded, and he slowly returned to how he used to be. Only Xiao Tianyu's mother remained depressed. She washed her face with tears. Today, Jianqin left Longevity Valley with Mingdong and Xiao Tianyu. He found a suitable location in the depths of the Cross Mountains and released the Inata Tower. Afterward, he took the two of them to the 9th floor to see if they were fated to obtain the Inata Grand Prime's legacy. Chapter 1505. On the 9th floor, the illusionary heavenly palace of Bixing shone with dazzling golden light, illuminating the surroundings, enveloping a small portion of the 9th floor. Even from extremely far away, the dazzling light from the heavenly palace of Bixing could be seen. The heavenly palace of Bixing was the residence of the Inata Grand Prime, a peak expert of the higher world. Even in the saints' world, it was renowned. It was so majestic that no divine hall on the Tianyuan continent could compare to it. Anyone who stood before the heavenly palace of Bixing for the first time would be deeply stunned by its majesty and grandeur. At this moment, Mingdong and Xiao Tianyu stood before the illusionary heavenly palace of Bixing. They stared at the palace blankly as shock filled their faces. In their eyes, the heavenly palace of Bixing did not seem to be just a palace. Instead, it seemed to be the sky that loomed over them. Jianqin, is this divine hall real or fake? With my strength as the Holy Emperor, I actually feel like I'm as weak as an ant before this divine hall. The presence from this divine hall is just too powerful. It's almost suffocating. Mingdong was the first to return to his senses after quite a while. He stared at the heavenly palace of Bixing and sighed in amazement. In the past, Mingdong's strength had reached the level of a holy emperor through Jianqin's violet cloud peaches. In the following decade or so, Mingdong had consumed the various heavenly resources from the Xianhuang microcosm that Jianqin had left for him, breaking through once again. He had become a holy emperor now. It's both real and fake. Let's go in with me. There's a Supreme Senior's legacy in there. Whether you can obtain it or not will depend on fate. Don't ask too much about the matters here. With that, Jianqin entered the illusionary heavenly palace of Bixing first. A sliver of surprise immediately appeared in Mingdong and Xiao Tianyu's eyes when they saw Jianqin step on the illusionary steps like they were real. Afterwards, the two of them followed behind Jianqin out of curiosity, setting foot on the steps as well. Jianqin brought Mingdong and Xiao Tianyu to the Fortune Jade seat with great familiarity. After giving them some instructions, he got the two of them to sit on the seat. I'm already a holy emperor now, while you're still a holy emperor. You should receive the legacy first, Mingdong said to Xiao Tianyu. Xiao Tianyu hesitated, but he did not decline in the end. He directly made his way onto the seat and sat down. Jianqin stared at Xiao Tianyu. He knew that he was not fated to obtain the Inata Grand Prime's legacy, so he naturally hoped that one of his friends would be fated to obtain the Inata Grand Prime's legacy. He had a sliver of selfishness in his heart. He did not wish for such a great fortuitous encounter to end up in the hands of an outsider. A few seconds later, the familiar and tremendous power surged out from the fortune jade seed again, pushing little Fatty off. Jianqin sighed gently. Little Fatty's talent was rare, yet even he did not have the right to obtain the Anata Grand Prime's legacy. He really had no idea what kind of conditions were needed to obtain the Anata Grand Prime's legacy. Perhaps people like that only existed in the saints' world. It was impossible for them to be born in a lower world. Now, it was Ming Dong's turn to try. He sat down on the fortune jade seat like little Fatty and closed his eyes. He used his mind to sense the mysteries within the seat. Jianqin no longer held any hope now. He knew that perhaps no one in the lower world had the right to obtain the Anata Grand Prime's legacy. Only the prodigies of the saints' world would meet the requirements. His thoughts of leaving the Anata Grand Prime's legacy to someone close to him were destined to fail. As expected, a few seconds later, the extremely familiar, gentle power surged out from the fortune jade seed again. Jianqin had expected this outcome long ago, so he was not surprised at all. He knew that Jianqin would be pushed off the fortune jade seat in the next moment. But very soon, Jianqin's eyes suddenly narrowed. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Ming Dong, who remained seated on the fortune jade seat in surprise. His expression finally changed at that moment. The tremendous, gentle power did not push Ming Dong off the fortune jade seat like Jianqin had imagined. Instead, it wrapped around Ming Dong like a cocoon. At the same time, the heavenly palace of Bixing began to gently tremble. The illusory palace became rather blurry at that moment, but an extremely bright light shone from it. The light was as dazzling as the sun, illuminating the entire 9th floor with golden light. Jianqin could not help but close his eyes. The golden light had come and gone quickly. When Jianqin sensed the golden light disperse, he felt a sense of emptiness below his feet. Before he could react, he felt a sense of weightlessness. He fell to the ground freely, falling from the air. Jianqin immediately controlled his body to hover in the air. When he opened his eyes, he was immediately stunned. This was because the heavenly palace of Bixing was nowhere to be seen. Only the stone tablet that represented him refining the 1st floor remained where it used to be. The entire heavenly palace of Bixing seemed to have vanished into thin air. Jianqin's expression became extremely ugly because the heavenly palace of Bixing was not the only thing that had vanished. Ming Dong had vanished from the 9th floor with the projection of the heavenly palace of Bixing. Where's Ming Dong? Jianqin, where's Ming Dong? Xiao Tianyu cried out from beside Jianqin. He looked around as he became slightly worried. Jianqin's face sank. His soul immediately fused with the Anata Tower, carefully searching through every inch of the 9th floor in an attempt to find any traces of Ming Dong. However, he was disappointed in the end. Ming Dong seemed to have left the Anata Tower. He was nowhere to be found. After quite a while of silence, Jianqin said slowly, "It looks like Ming Dong is fated to meet that senior. He has obtained the senior's recognition and has been taken away." Xiao Tianyu let out a sigh of relief and said, "Jianqin, do you know where Ming Dong is? Let's go find him." Jianqin sighed and shook his head gently. His face was bitter. He had already realized that it was extremely likely that Ming Dong had been taken to the saints' world by the power of the fortune jade seat. He was no longer in this world. He had no idea whether to rejoice or worry over this. Chapter 1506. Little Fatty, let's go. As for Ming Dong, we probably won't be able to find him anytime soon. We might meet again in the future, Jianqin said. He was rather gloomy. He had never thought that the fortune jade pedestal and the heavenly palace of Bixing could actually teleport people. If he had known earlier, Jianqin would not have been in such a hurry to find a successor for the Anata Grand Prime's legacy. Although he had always hoped that the Anata Grand Prime's legacy could be obtained by someone close to him and not fall into the hands of an outsider, he did not want Ming Dong to leave this world and be teleported to the saints' world alone. This was because the Anata Grand Prime was already dead. Even if Ming Dong obtained the legacy, he would not be able to obtain the Anita Grand Prime's protection. At the same time, there were many people who desired the legacy in the saint's world. If news of Mingdong obtaining the legacy leaked out, there would probably be no place for him in the entire saint's world. In short, if the Anita Grand Prime's legacy was on the Tianyuan continent, Jianqin could still provide protection with his current strength. However, if it happened in the saint's world, there was nothing Jianqin could do. Jianqin left the Anita Tower with little Fatty. After stowing the tower away, he returned to Longevity Valley. In Longevity Valley, the sorrow brought by Xiaomi's death had been greatly diluted. The villagers who had lived there for generations gradually returned to their former lives. However, there were still some people who were rather uncomfortable without Xiaomi, which led to some of the villagers becoming rather silent. Yu remained by little Fatty's mother's side to comfort her. During the few days she had spent in Longevity Valley, the villagers gradually learned about her identity. Perhaps the villagers who had lived there for generations did not know the identity of a princess, but all they needed to know was that she was Jianqin's fiancée. She was warmly welcomed by all the villagers. Jianqin did not stay in Longevity Valley for long. After he returned to Longevity Valley with little Fatty, he pulled Yu to Uncle Xiaomi's grave to pay his respects. Then he bid farewell to the villagers of Longevity Valley. Jianqin, your Miss Yu is so beautiful. I, Arrow, have never seen a girl as beautiful as you. You must treat her well. Don't let her down. Jianqin, even though you weren't born and raised in Longevity Valley, the people here have long treated you as one of their own. When you get married, you must remember to invite everyone to your wedding banquet. Uncle Han is right. Jianqin, when you get married, you must definitely invite everyone to your wedding banquet. Right? I heard from little Fatty that you created some city in the outside world, and it's very famous. It seems to be very impressive. Don't tell me that you are getting married in that city. When the time comes, you must remember us from Longevity Valley and invite everyone to your wedding banquet. At the same time, let us all see just how big that city you created in the outside world is, and which one is bigger compared to our Longevity Valley. Before leaving, the villagers of Longevity Valley all came to chat with Jianqin. In order to send Jianqin off, many people talked about Jianqin and Yu's wedding. Yu's face blushed a little after being talked about by the crowd. She felt a little shy, but her heart was filled with sweetness. Jianqin responded to each and every one of them with a smile. At this moment, an old man from the village walked up from behind with a cane in his hand. He said to Jianqin, "Little Qin, don't delay the wedding between you and Yu for too long. This old man knows that you people who have cultivated Saint Force can live for a very long time, but there are still many people in Longevity Valley who haven't cultivated before. The longest they can live is 200 years. Don't wait for hundreds or thousands of years for your wedding. You people who have cultivated before can afford to wait, but ordinary people like us can't. Sigh, I'm getting old, and I don't have many more years to live. I just hope that at the last moment of my life, I can see you juniors getting married." "That's right. Don't let us disappear when you get married." A burly, middle-aged man chuckled from beside the old man. He was clearly teasing them. However, the speaker did not mean what he said, but the listener did. Jianqin immediately felt like he had been struck by a bolt of lightning when he heard those words. He was extremely shocked. He knew that the next battle with the world of Forsaken Saints would definitely be the most ferocious invasion from the world of Forsaken Saints. Not only would there be several dozen Receival experts, but there would also be several Returnance experts. There would even be the extremely powerful Spirit King who had reached Origin Energy and comprehended the way of the sword. No one knew who would survive in such an intense battle. Even Jianqin was not completely confident that he could survive the battle. After bidding farewell to the people of Longevity Valley, Jianqin and Yu left. Little Fatty did not leave with them. Instead, he stayed behind to accompany his grief-stricken mother. The Ziying's sword shone with resplendent light as it rapidly flew above the clouds. Jianqin seemed to have a lot on his mind as he stood on the Ziying's sword. Jianqin, what's wrong with you? Is there something on your mind? Yu sensed Jianqin's abnormality and immediately showed concern. Jianqin gently hugged Yu's slender waist. After a moment of silence, he said, let's get married as soon as possible. You clearly did not expect Jianqin to suddenly make a decision like that. She was stunned, but she understood what Jianqin was thinking very soon. She did not show any joy at all. Instead, she became rather sorrowful. Jianqin, are you worried that we won't be able to see each other again after the next battle with the world of forsaken saints? You gently asked. Her voice trembled slightly. Jianqin nodded slightly. He said nothing. He knew that the time he spent with Yu, his parents, and his friends and family would come to an end in the next battle with the world of forsaken saints. Perhaps the Tianyuan continent would vanish from the world forever after the next war. Let's get married in 3 days. What do you think? Jianqin asked. Chapter 1507. When Jianqin saw Yu's desolate smile, his heart skipped a beat. He had no idea just how many of his close friends and family would survive the next battle against the world of forsaken saints. Perhaps the Tianyuan continent would collapse in the next battle. Perhaps it would be reduced to islands scattered across the vast ocean. Or perhaps the entire continent would be reduced to dust and sink to the bottom of the ocean, becoming a part of the ocean. Even his life would come to an end in that battle. He would burn out the last of his life. Perhaps the Tianyuan continent would successfully fend off the attack of the world of forsaken saints. The countless faces in Jianqin's head would still exist after the next battle, but Jianqin knew that the chances were extremely slim with the difference in strength between the Tianyuan continent and the world of forsaken saints. After over a decade, the White Tiger still hasn't emerged from accepting the Beast God's legacy on the Beast God continent. Once he comes out, he'll probably reach the Origin Realm, and the Beast God Hall will be under the White Tiger's control. Senior Tianjian is still refining the Supreme Divine Hall left behind by Mo Tianyin. The Supreme Divine Hall is extremely extraordinary. I was too weak back then, so I couldn't see through its mysteries. But now that I think about it carefully, I probably won't be able to destroy it even if I use my full strength. If the Divine Hall is used to guard the tunnel between the two worlds, we should be able to stop the world of forsaken saints from invading the Tianyuan continent, Jianqin thought. It was not as if the Tianyuan continent had no hope of fending off the world of forsaken saints. It all depended on whether the White Tiger could successfully complete his legacy and control the Beast God Hall before the next battle. Whether Great Elder Tianjian could refine the Supreme Divine Hall in Mercenary City in time and use it to guard the tunnel between the two worlds. Jianqin and Yu went their separate ways. Yu returned alone to prepare for the wedding, while Jianqin did not change direction. He directly flew to the Huang family. The Huang family was no longer the same as before. Whether it was their relationship with Jianqin or their ancestor, Huang Tianba, becoming a Saint Emperor, it was enough for the Huang family's name to spread across the entire Tianyuan continent. They were no longer a hermit clan that could only intimidate a region. Even though there were many holy emperor experts now, and Huang Tianba was not particularly outstanding among them, he was definitely one of the most famous holy emperors among the four races. When Jianqin arrived at the Huang family on his sword, a powerful barrier enveloped a radius of several hundred kilometers around the manor. The barrier had been personally cast down by Huang Tianba and possessed great defensive power. Only holy emperor experts could break through it. It had become the Huang family's greatest defensive measure. Although the Huang family continued to live the life of a hermit and had become countless times more powerful than before, their vigilance did not decrease at all. Just as Jianqin approached the territory of the Huang family and arrived before the barrier cast down by Huang Tianba, two powerful presences radiated from the Huang family. Two figures fused with the surrounding space and flew out of the villa. Although they moved very quickly, they did not stir up any wind at all. They were completely silent. "Who are you? Tell me your name." As the two figures rapidly approached, an old voice rang out. The voice was barely audible within the barrier, but as soon as it left the barrier, it immediately rumbled like thunder, exploding in the mountains. The sound waves covered a radius of 100 kilometers, startling the birds and beasts in the forest. Jianqin hovered in the air outside the barrier calmly. He stared at the manor several dozen kilometers away from the barrier as he faintly smiled. He did not conceal his presence this time. Within the manor, Huang Tianba suddenly opened his eyes in a dark secret room 1,000 meters below the ground. The moment he opened his eyes, 2 streaks of light shot out, illuminating the entire secret room. 2 finger-sized holes appeared on the door of the secret room that had not been reinforced. "It's Jianqin. Ha 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 ha, he's been missing for over a decade now. My great-granddaughter misses him so much." Huang Tianba laughed heartily. Huang Tianba let out a hearty laugh. With a flash, he vanished from the secret room and went out to receive him personally. At the same time, in the forbidden grounds of the Huang clan's manor, a small pavilion made of ordinary bamboo stood there quietly. Aside from the Huang clan's patriarch and ancestor, Huang Tianba, no one was allowed to enter this forbidden grounds. Even the elders of the Huang clan were not allowed to enter this place. There was only one building in the quiet, forbidden grounds. Many flowers and plants were planted around the building. Every single one of them was extremely precious, and just the fragrance they gave off possessed a unique effect. It was extremely beneficial to cultivators. There was even a type of flower that could not be seen on the Tianyuan continent. The fragrance it gave off was even beneficial to experts like the Holy Emperor. The flower was called Heaven-Connecting Flower. The soil used to grow the Heaven-Connecting Flower did not originate from the Tianyuan continent. At this moment, a slender woman in a yellow dress stood before the Heaven-Connecting Flowers. She held a watering can in her hand as she focused on watering the flowers. She was focused, and her gaze was gentle. She looked at the Heaven-Connecting Flowers as if she was looking at the person she loved. Her gaze was filled with gentleness as well as deep longing. The water in the watering bottle was a green liquid. It radiated with a tremendous presence of life. If this water appeared on the Tianyuan continent, it would be enough for saint rulers and holy emperor to fight over. It would lead to a bloodbath, yet it was only used to water the flowers here. She was Huang Luan. Ever since Jianqin had left, she had left Mercenary City. She had stayed in the building all these years, spending all her time with the flowers. She had not taken a single step out of the building, quietly waiting for Jianqin's return. In the days without Jianqin, Huang Wan would pour all of her yearning for Jianqin onto the Heaven-Connecting Flower. Jianqin had left the Heaven-Connecting Flower to her, so she felt like she was looking at Jianqin when she looked at the flowers. She felt like she was accompanying Jianqin when she stayed with the flowers. Chapter 1508. However, at this moment, Huang Wan suddenly froze as she watered the Heaven-Connecting Flowers with the spring of life. The spring of life in her hand that constantly gushed with life froze as well. Huang Wan suddenly raised her head and looked into the distance. Her gaze seemed to be able to pierce through space and the obstructions of the buildings. She could clearly see what was happening several dozen kilometers away. To no surprise, she was outside the barrier of the Huang family where Jianqin was. The kettle in Huang Wan's hand fell to the ground, and the spring of life immediately flowed out of the kettle, emitting a strong aura of life. However, at that moment, Huang Wan didn't even look at the water bottle that had fallen on the ground. Her delicate body trembled slightly as she stared into the distance. Her gaze contained excitement and joy. In her eyes, glistening teardrops faintly flickered. The 2 saint rulers who had flown out of the Huang family arrived beside their sister at the same time outside the barrier of the Huang family. They did not step out of the barrier, but they were only several dozen meters away from Jianchen. They were two white-robed old men. One of them had white hair and a ruddy complexion. His eyebrows reached his temples, giving him a sage-like presence. The other person seemed rather ordinary. Jianchen hovered there quietly as he indifferently glanced past the two old men. He did not know their names, but he had seen them in the Huang family before. They were only Heaven Saint Masters back then, but after several dozen years, they had both broken through and become saint rulers. "May I ask who you are? Why have you come to our Huang family?" The sage-like old man clasped his hands at Jianchen and asked nonchalantly. However, before he could finish speaking, his eyes suddenly narrowed and widened. He stared at Jianchen in shock. His expression rapidly changed, turning into shock, respect, and disbelief in the end. At the same time, the expression of the ordinary-looking saint ruler beside him changed drastically as well. In the end, it also turned into shock and respect. Clearly, he had recognized Jianchen. "Huang family's elder Huang Bing greets Supreme Jianchen." "Huang family's elder Huang Yifeng greets Supreme Jianchen." Without any hesitation, the two saint rulers bowed to Jianchen and lowered their heads. They were very respectful, but there was also a sliver of excitement. "Ha ha ha, little friend Jianchen, you finally appeared. If you hadn't appeared, I'm afraid that in a few years this old man would have searched the entire world for you." With a hearty laugh, Huang Tianba appeared in the air. He strode over, and with each step a visible spatial ripple appeared. He crossed several dozen kilometers in just a few steps and arrived before Jianchen. "It is the honor of our Huang family for the sovereign of the human race to visit us. Children, why don't you come out and welcome the sovereign of the human race?" Huang Tianba laughed loudly. His voice was loud and clear, and it reverberated through the entire territory of the Huang family. It alarmed everyone in the Huang family. Even the clansmen who were in seclusion woke up early from their cultivation with Huang Tianba's words. Immediately, the people of the Huang family surged. Everyone stopped what they were doing and came out to welcome Jianchen. Jianchen bitterly smiled when he saw this. He said, "Senior Huang, there's no need to do this. Jianchen, you've already become the sovereign of the human race. You're the greatest expert on the Tianyuan continent. You possess a great status, so it's our honor to have you personally visit our Huang family. The entire Huang family is proud of you, and we enjoy an extraordinary status on the Tianyuan continent. You have to do this. You have to do this," Huang Tianba laughed. If it were any other holy emperor, they would definitely have bowed to Jianchen. However, due to Huang Tianba's relationship with his great-granddaughter, Jianchen, there was no need for him to be courteous to Jianchen. At this moment, Jianchen and Huang Tianba seemed to sense something. They both looked in the direction of the Huang family's villa. At this moment, a yellow figure flew out of the villa, approaching them at a steady pace. It was Huang Luan. Her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at Jianchen emotionally. However, she did not move quickly. She slowly flew over at a speed that was extremely slow for a holy emperor. "You're back." Huang Luan arrived in front of Jianchen. She did not say 1,000 words. She only said the sentence that was filled with deep longing, excitement, and trembling. "I'm back." Jianchen smiled at Huang Luan before taking a step forward. He arrived before her and hugged her tightly. Huang Luan also hugged Jianchen tightly. She buried her head deep into Jianchen's chest as her body trembled violently. She could no longer hold back her tears. Huang Tianba stroked his long beard as he watched this from one side with a smile. He then waved his hand at the people of the Huang family below, dispersing them. Afterward, he left silently as well, leaving Jianchen and Huang Luan alone. Huang Manor. In the forbidden area of the Huang family, Jianchen and Huang Luan were strolling in the garden that was filled with a strong fragrance. Huang Luan hugged Jianqin's arm with a satisfied expression as she listened to Jianqin narrate his experiences over the years. This forbidden area was very quiet. Apart from Jianqin and Huang Luan, there was no one else. At this moment, this forbidden area seemed to have become a small world that belonged exclusively to Jianqin and Huang Luan. At this time, Jianqin stopped and turned his head to look at Huang Luan. With a serious expression, he asked, "Luan, are you willing to marry me?" Huang Luan unhappily glared at Jianqin when she heard that. She said, "It's not like you don't know about my feelings for you. Moreover, I'm already yours. You already know whether I'm willing to marry you or not. Then come back to Flame City with me. In 3 days we'll get married. Other than you, there'll be you and even—" Jianqin hesitated. He thought of the Heavenly Enchantress. The Heavenly Enchantress had already given birth to a son for him. According to tradition, he would marry the Heavenly Enchantress. But with the Heavenly Enchantress' personality, Jianqin really could not guarantee whether she would agree or not. Huang Luan glared at Jianqin and angrily said, "Jianqin, is there a third woman aside from me and you? Who is that person?" "She's known as the Heavenly Enchantress on the Tianyuan continent, but she's no longer the saint ruler of the past," Jianqin said with some melancholy. At this moment, he could not help but think back to when he first met the Heavenly Enchantress. He remembered that it was in a miniature world in Mercenary City. He was only a puny earth saint master, and the Heavenly Enchantress was an unreachable expert in his eyes. Chapter 1509. On the same day, Jianqin left the Huang family with Huang Luan and returned to Flame City. Before long, the news that the captain of the Flame Mercenaries, the city lord of Flame City, and the greatest human expert, Jianqin, was about to get married spread from the city. It spread across the entire continent in an extremely short amount of time. In just half a day, the sea realm, magical beasts, and the wasteland continent all received the news at the same time, shocking all 4 races. The wedding was set to take place in Flame City. The identity of the bride did not spread, which led to guesses in the outside world. Many people believed that Jianqin definitely would have more than one bride for his wedding. Other than Yu, who was publicly acknowledged as his fiancée, there would definitely be a second, third, or even more. There were even a few people who were familiar with Jianqin who guessed that Huang Luan would become Jianqin's second bride. Bai Yuntian ended her cultivation in the artifact space as well. She appeared in Flame City and commanded the people of the city. She personally began making arrangements for her son's wedding. Bai Lian participated in the planning as well. As the bride, Yu and Huang Luan vanished from everyone's sight. According to custom, the 2 of them could not see the outside world until the day of the wedding. The king of the kingdom of Jessin had also hurried over from afar. He was currently beaming with joy as he smiled from the bottom of his heart. His face was filled with pride. Although Cardsun had been the king of the kingdom of Jessin for several decades now, and the kingdom of Jessin's status on the Tianyuan continent could not be compared to the past, Cardsun believed that he had never lived such a glorious life before. After Jianqin and Yu's wedding, he had become the father of the greatest human expert. All the important people of Lore City and Changyang Prefecture arrived in Flame City through space gates. Jianqin's 3 aunts and Chang Bo all participated in the various arrangements for Jianqin's wedding. At the same time, a large number of invitations made from violet gold were sent out from Flame City. They were sent to various places, inviting all the people Jianqin was familiar with. Not only did the people of the Qin Empire receive invitations, but even Qin Xiao of the Tianqin clan received one as well. A portion of the invitations were even sent to the Sea Race, the Magical Beasts, and the 100 Races by the Holy Emperor of Flame City and the Holy Emperor of Flame City. Flame City immediately became busy. All the people in the city began to clean up the city. The city was decorated with lanterns and banners. All the mercenaries of the Flame Mercenaries volunteered to prepare for the wedding of the captain they admired the most. Jianqin did not take part in the arrangements for the wedding. These matters were all handled by his seniors and by Lien. As for himself, he left Flame City and directly made his way to Three Saint Island. At this moment, the heavenly enchantress stood on Three Saint Mountain on Three Saint Island as she gazed in the direction of the Tian Yuan continent. Wild winds whistled in the sky, causing her purple dress to ruffle and her hair to drift in the wind. She held a guqin in her arms. It was 6 feet long and 1 foot wide. There were 36 strings on it, and every single string shone brightly, as if there was a mysterious energy flowing within. Vaguely, there seemed to be an ethereal sound coming from the strings, but if one listened carefully, they would not be able to hear anything at all. The heavenly enchantress stood there with the zither in her arms. Her gaze toward the Tian Yuan continent was filled with many mixed feelings. In particular, she could even see a shrunken version of Flame City in her eyes. Countless people bustled about in the city, decorating it with lanterns and banners. At this moment, a young man who seemed to be in his 20s and seemed rather similar to Jianqin walked over from afar. He looked at the heavenly enchantress with some eagerness and said, "Mother, Father has already gone missing for over a decade. There's no trace of him anywhere. When do you think Father will return?" "Your father has already returned. You'll be able to see him very soon." The heavenly enchantress turned around and looked at the young man with a gaze filled with gentleness. The young man rejoiced when he heard that. He asked in some disbelief, "Really? Father has really returned?" The young man was Shangguan Aojian. He had already grown up now, becoming a handsome young man. He was no longer the child from before. Shangguan Aojian's face did not show any signs of immaturity. There was only a sense of coldness. A faint presence of blood could even be sensed from him. This was a presence that could only be possessed by people who had gone through life and death battles. As soon as Shangguan Aojian finished speaking, a dazzling speck of violet light suddenly appeared in the distant horizon. In less than a few seconds, the speck of violet light turned into a dazzling streak of light, shooting over from afar with indescribable speed. Shangguan Aojian immediately became overjoyed when he saw the streak of violet light. He was filled with excitement as he said, "It's Father, it really is Father. Mother, Father has really returned." The streak of violet light moved extremely quickly, arriving on Three Saint Island in a single moment. The violet light dispersed, revealing the white-clothed Jianqin. At this moment, Jianqin was only a few hundred meters away from Shangguan Aojian. However, Jianqin did not look at the heavenly enchantress. Instead, he looked at Shangguan Aojian, who was several hundred meters away. He faintly smiled as well as some guilt. He still clearly remembered that the last time he saw Xiaobao was just an innocent child. But now, Xiaobao was already an adult. He knew that he was not a good father. He did not fulfill his responsibilities as a father. He owed Xiaobao too much. However, there were some things that were beyond his control. This caused his heart to be filled with waves of bitterness. "Father, you've finally returned." Shangguan Aojian was overjoyed as he quickly walked over. His face was filled with joy from seeing Jianqin. He did not blame or reprimand his father at all. Jianqin also made his way over. He grabbed Shangguan Aojian's shoulders with both hands and carefully studied his son. He could obviously sense the faint presence of blood from Xiaobao as well as the determination that had been tempered by all sorts of hardships. "Xiaobao, you've grown up," Jianqin said. His emotions were mixed. He felt gratified, emotional, and guilty. Afterwards, he gently pulled open Xiaobao's clothes with one hand, revealing most of his chest. There were 3 vicious scars on Xiaobao's chest. Every single one of them ran through his entire chest. Chapter 1510. "Father, while you were gone, I left Three Saint Island and traveled through the Tian Yuan continent, the Beast God continent, the Wasteland continent, and the Sea Realm. My wounds all came from the battles I fought along the way," Jianqin said. Shangguan Aojian explained when he saw Jianqin notice his wounds. He seemed rather proud. Originally, I did not plan on keeping these scars. The recovery of the chaotic body can make all the scars vanish, but my mother insisted on keeping these 3 scars. Jianqin glanced at the heavenly enchantress who stood nearby with her back to him, staring at the vast sea. He obviously knew that the heavenly enchantress wanted Xiao Bao to leave behind the 3 scars for him. Or it could be said that she wanted these 3 scars to tell her that when little Bao went out to gain experience, he had encountered numerous dangers and had even almost lost his life a few times. However, when little Bao was in danger, as his father, she was not by little Bao's side. Xiao Bao, I've been gone for over a decade. During that time, I didn't even help you when you were in danger. Do you blame me? Jianqin gently asked. His voice was filled with self-blame and guilt. Shangguan Aojian shook his head. Not only was he not angered, but he even showed some pride. He said, "Father, I once stayed on the Tianyuan continent for a period of time. I've already understood a few things about your past from the mouths of others and some rumors. I also understand just how heavy the burden on your shoulders is right now. Xiao Bao will only feel proud to have a father like you." Jianqin smiled. He was filled with joy and relief. At the same time, he let out a sigh of relief inside. What he feared the most was that Xiao Bao would resent him and become dissatisfied with him. Now, all his uneasiness had vanished with Shangguan Aojian's words. Even though he was the greatest human expert in the eyes of others, even though he was a cold and merciless god of death in the eyes of his enemies, he was only a father before Xiao Bao, a benevolent father. And in the sea realm I came across a senior with unfathomable strength. I couldn't see the senior's face clearly, but the senior understood father extremely well. From the senior, I learnt even more about father's past. It was also the senior who allowed me to understand just what price father had paid to reach his current level of cultivation in just a few decades, said Shangguan Aojian. His gaze towards Jianqin was filled with admiration. Oh, right, the unfathomable senior from the sea realm gave me a jade pendant. There was once when I was in danger, and it was all thanks to this jade pendant that I was saved. Shangguan Aojian pulled out a palm-sized jade pendant from his space ring. The jade pendant was exquisite and was engraved with simple patterns. At the center of the patterns was a trident that seemed to be able to pierce through the world. Vaguely, the trident gave off a pressure that was enough to make even Holy Emperor experts shiver in fear. Jianqin stared at the jade pendant. He could sense the power of an origin realm expert from the jade pendant, and he was extremely familiar with the power. He already knew who the senior from the sea race that Shangguan Aojian mentioned was. Xiao Bao, take good care of this jade pendant. It can block several full-powered attacks from Holy Emperor experts for you. With it, even the Holy Emperor won't be able to kill you, said Shangguan Aojian. Not only did the creation of a jade pendant require great strength, but it also required a corresponding technique and method. Jianqin did not know how to create the jade pendant, so he was unable to create something that could block attacks from Holy Emperor experts. A smear of surprise appeared in Shangguan Aojian's eyes. He carefully stowed the jade pendant away before looking at Jianqin and the heavenly enchantress. He smiled. Father, mother, have a good chat. I'll go catch some fish. It's rare for the 3 of us to be reunited, so we have to celebrate like the fishermen on the island. With that, Xiao Bao left 3 Saint Island. With his departure, only Jianqin and the heavenly enchantress remained on the peak of 3 Saint Island. Jianqin looked at the heavenly enchantress. Mixed feelings filled his face. He strode over and slowly arrived beside her. He gently sighed. Moo! It's already been so many years. Even Xiao Bao has grown up. Are you still unable to let go of what happened in the past? I'm the heavenly enchantress. The heavenly enchantress was emotionless. Her cold voice was emotionless, but mixed feelings also flickered through her enchanting eyes. The heavenly enchantress is just a title given to you by the people of the Tianyuan continent. Shangguan Mu is your true name, said Jianqin. The heavenly enchantress immediately trembled when she heard Shangguan Mu's name. She gently bit her lip as a sliver of sorrow appeared in the depths of her eyes. If you continue to deny this name, it'll be meaningless for Xiao Bao to have the surname Shangguan, continued Jianqin. The heavenly enchantress fell silent. She slowly sat down and placed the zither of the demonic cry on her legs. She gently plucked the strings with her hands, producing a pleasant melody. Every single note seemed to be filled with a mysterious charm that could reach deep into one's soul and reverberate through one's mind. It could affect a person's emotions and will. However, although the sound of the zither was beautiful and sounded like heavenly music, it did not have its usual lightness. Instead, it sounded a little dull. Jianqin also sat down beside the heavenly enchantress. He turned his head and looked at her indescribably beautiful face. He said, I know you resent me, and a portion of it comes from Xiao Bao. During these years, when little Bao was growing up, I didn't fulfill my responsibility as a father. When he encountered danger, I didn't protect him by his side. But you ought to be clearly aware that I had no choice at all. Although I've disappeared for over a decade, I've always been working hard to increase the strength of our side. I just hope that when the world of Forsaken Saints invades again, we'll be even more powerful to fend off the invaders and protect the world we live in. During that time, I even encountered an unprecedented, life-threatening danger. I was only half a step away from death and almost died. Although I managed to survive in the end, the price was the destruction of my body, leaving only my soul behind. As for Xiao Bao, I will make it up to him. I'll make up for everything I've done to him in the past few years. The heavenly enchantress remained unmoved, as if she had not heard what Jianqin had said at all. She focused all of her attention on the zither, playing it with all her heart. She paid no attention to the outside world. Jianqin remained silent for a while before continuing. In 3 days, I'll be holding a wedding with you, and Luan in Flame City. I'll take you there this time to make up for our missing wedding. At the same time, I'll announce to the world that Jianqin is my son. I won't be going. Xiao Bao won't be going either. This time the heavenly enchantress spoke. Her voice was cold and resolute. Jianqin let out a long sigh. He looked at the heavenly enchantress with a slight headache and said, Mu, some things have already been decided. Why can't you accept it and let it go? You can say that to me when you've truly done what a father should do. And only mortals would do something as meaningless as a wedding, the heavenly enchantress coldly said. The heavenly enchantress said coldly. Her zither continued to play, but it had become much more oppressive. Jianqin secretly rejoiced inside. He could tell from what the heavenly enchantress had said that her resentment for him had decreased. The main reason why she was dissatisfied with him was because of Xiao Bao. In particular, Jianqin felt like he had suddenly seen the light after hearing the heavenly enchantress' last sentence. Marriage was a major event in life for mortals, and it was also a necessary ceremony. However, it was indeed meaningless to fighters with long lifespans. There were even some fighters on the Tianyuan continent who did not talk about marriage at all when they got married. As long as both parties were willing, there was no need for any ceremony. As long as they had done it, they were husband and wife. They did not even need to inform their parents or seniors. The reason why so many people still maintain the customs of mortals was because all fighters had slowly grown up as mortals. As a result, even though some fighters were powerful, they were still unable to change the customs of mortals due to their habits. Jianqin did not place too much importance on marriage after understanding this. Holding a wedding was just a tradition that had slowly spread among mortals. It did not represent anything. In reality, he had already done it with the heavenly enchantress and Huangluan. They were already husband and wife. Even if they did not get married, it would not change the fact that they were already husband and wife.